of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good evening. Thanks for coming out on
Another
night like
rainy
this.
Tuesday. Rains every Tuesday.
Is there any public comment? Oh, I should announce that in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. Is there any public comment from the board?
Do you have any? I just wanted to say one thing. I was at the Boys and Girls Club this afternoon dropping off some juice, and when the young man took it from me, he said, "This is the most wonderful community." He had worked at a Boys and Girls Club elsewhere in Massachusetts for 15 years, and they always had donation boxes out, and no one ever gave them anything. And he said, people just come in off the street and hand them all sorts of things all the time. And they just wanted to thank the community for being so supportive of the Boys and Girls Club. So if you have something you don't want, take it over to the Boys and Girls Club. They can use it.
Is there any public comment from the public? Please.
Am I supposed to go up?
Please. And please give us your name and address before you begin.
My name is Lynn Mann, and my address is 463 Burridge Street in Lunenburg.
Thank you.
And good evening. I'm here to represent a group of people with a concern, and maybe the people who are here with me can raise their hands so you can see who they are. But we're representing, even us, we're representing a larger group of Lunenburg citizens that are concerned that we either abut conservation land or utilize these resources for their beauty and recreation. I have a prepared statement, I'm just going to read that. Mm-hmm. We appreciate the opportunity to present a concern to you tonight. We are concerned about forest stewardship plans in our 5 most heavily used conservation areas. We recognize that there are competing interests in the use of this land and would therefore like for there to be a fair process in deciding how to proceed. This process should involve town residents, business owners, and people who are affected by such decisions, as well as those with the town's charged with the town's best interests. In the eyes of those who use the forest, selective harvesting is akin to logging. Logging, including selective logging, creates many large roads and skidder trails and leaves silt, uncollected chips, etc., which can severely limit the recreation value of the land for many people. The stewardship plan for Robb's Hill appears to be consistent with the Massachusetts Forestry Best Management Practices Manual. However, what we see on the ground months after the small town harvest does not reflect the spirit of conservation in which the forestry proposal was presented. So we would like to ask the Board of Selectmen to help us to ensure that our treasured conservation areas are preserved in a way that is acceptable to all Lunenburg residents. In this vein, we are asking for a moratorium on all forestry stewardship projects until the following things are accomplished. First, we would like to do a walk all the way to the end of the small town forest with the Conservation Commission, the forestry consultant, Gary Goldrup, and with the Board of Selectmen. We would like for you guys to come with us also, so that we can understand how what appears to us to be a very poorly executed implementation is in fact okay and will be okay in the long run. And we anticipate that they would be able to explain that to us as we are looking at what we see, what looks like a mess to us. The second thing is we request that the town complete all cleanup and rehab work at the small town forest and allow time for it to start to come back prior to undertaking another selective harvesting project. That project should be completed first before embarking on another one. Third, we would like the Conservation Commission to please provide examples of similar projects that were completed 5 to 10 years ago with detailed directions to very specific sites so that we can, of the forests that were logged, so maps with the areas that were actually logged, so that we can go out and see for ourselves what it looks like 5 to 10 years after the project has been completed. We would like, and we request the appointment from the Board of Selectmen. We request the appointment of a special task force to do the following: evaluate alternatives to the existing cutting plans that might also achieve forest stewardship goals of maintaining forest health while minimizing the collateral damage that we see in the forest today. That is, impacts on natural, aesthetic, and recreational features. This should include options that do not require selective cutting. So we are willing to look at all options, but we want to see more options on the table. It is vital to develop a plan to improve effective communication with the town citizens regarding any proposed forestry management and cutting. In just the past week, we have talked to over 100 residents around Lunenburg, and not a single person was aware of any proposals for cutting, and yet cutting had occurred in the small town forest, and the process to cut in Robb's Hill Forest is well underway. We need to allow time to inform citizens of any proposed plans and alternative options, to evaluate costs and consequences of each, and invite Lunenburg residents to participate in the decision process. We would like to be on the agenda for the next Board of Selectmen meeting to discuss how we can work together and collaborate on the above points. Thank you for taking our comments tonight, and we look forward to working with you and the Conservation Commission to achieve our mutual goals for the town. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Yes, please.
My name is Ingrid Cruz Helmer. I reside at 141 Canterbury Drive. And I'm here to inform the board this evening of the Lunenburg ROAR, which stands for the Lunenburg Resources for Opiate Awareness and Recovery. We're a grassroots organization whose mission is to increase awareness of substance abuse and addiction, to provide fact-based information to encourage safe and healthy choices, and to provide information about support and resources to addicted persons, their families, and members of the community at large. Our members include educators, medical and mental health professionals, public safety personnel, clergy, family members of addicted persons, and members of the community. We always welcome new members to share their ideas and talents. We came together in the spring of 2017 in response to the rising tide of opiate addiction. And since that time, we have presented several well-attended programs to the community, and we've attended a number of community events. Our first program was the Opiate Forum, which we presented in October of last year. At this program, we showed a film entitled If Only, and had a diverse panel of guests give their perspectives on the problems of addiction. We had about 220 people attend this program. In March, we had a clinical psychologist who specializes in addiction give a talk to the community on substance abuse and how families can help. This talk was attended by about 60 people. In April, we had our third event on a little bit of a different vein. This was called Well-Being and Resilience, and this was presented by retired Army Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum, who shared her personal story about being captured during the Persian Gulf War, and she described how resiliency and positive thought got her through the ordeal. And of course, resiliency and positive thinking are issues that certainly help to prevent substance abuse. Members of ROAR have attended community events. We've been at the Lunenburg Arts Festival, the Walmart Wellness Fair, and the Stillman's Country Fair. And at those events, our members reached out to individuals to talk about our programs and handed out leaflets on resources and support groups available in the area. Our next event is coming up November 1st, and this will be given by Dr. Ruth Pote, who's presenting Substance Use and the Teen Brain. This will take place on November 1st at 6:30 at the Lunenburg Middle High School Auditorium. Dr. Pote is a family physician located in Greenfield, Mass., who specializes in addiction medicine. She's well known in her field and has spoken to many community and physician groups throughout Massachusetts. Her presentation will focus on how substances and addictive behaviors affect the brain and how the developing teen brain is injured during prolonged exposure to these substances. Unlike my talk, Dr. Pote is extremely dynamic and engaging. Her presentation is very down-to-earth, appropriate for anyone who would like to attend. Teens, parents, members of the community, health and mental health professionals. You certainly don't need a science degree to be able to understand her talk, because I've heard it in another community. At this program, we'll also have some vendor tables with various recovery programs, mental health professionals, and information about other resources. This program is being sponsored by Walmart. In order to be able to have other programs, we are also going to be hosting a fundraiser at the Outback Steakhouse on November 8th. And you'd be able to find out more details on this, as well as our other programs on Facebook. I do have some flyers about the Pote program, if I may present these to the board.
Is this the agenda item?
Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yes. We'll be seeing these around town. And again, November 1st, 6 o'clock for the vendors and 6:30 for the presentation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Well, thank you very much for providing the service.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Kind of got ahead of ourselves there a little bit. Was there any other public comment?
Mr. Chair, if I may do a board comment, just to follow up with a public comment. The Robs Hill area asked to be put on the agenda, and I don't know if maybe we could possibly respond to that, because I feel like there's a timeliness to it. I know that trees have been marked, and so what can we provide in response to discussing the topic of the forest?
Yeah,
And
we noted that request, and as the Conservation Commission, which is handling that process, is appointed by us, I think it's appropriate for us to get that on the agenda as soon as possible.
Okay, sure, yes. So are we able?
They've just had their first public hearing, and there will be more public hearings.
Sure, I just want to be responsive to people's attempt to communicate, and I didn't know at what point we can.
Yeah, I heard their request.
Okay.
Okay. See a lot of Lunenburg's finest here tonight. I wonder if it would be okay if we moved up our interview and appointments in front of our 7:10 agenda item.
Absolutely.
Okay. Chief?
All right, so, I want to recommend 2 officers to be appointed full-time. One of them, and I think I discussed this with you before, one of them is going to replace a vacancy that was created by the departure of Lieutenant Luth. The second is an addition to the police department, which was in the operational budget this fiscal year. First subject, John M. Wagner. He was selected as a finalist from a pool of applicants through a hiring process that included an application pre-screening component and an oral board. All the candidates are currently employed by the police department as reserve officers presently. John is a graduate of Lunenburg High School, holds an associate's degree in criminal justice from Mount Wachusett, a bachelor's in science and criminal justice from Pittsburgh State. He's been a construction worker, served at other venues. He did 2 internships with the Lunenburg Police Department, one when he was with Mount Wachusett and the other with Fitchburg State. He was appointed to reserve March 22nd, 2016. He again went through the police academy, the reserve intermittent academy, did the 345-hour-and-a-half program, passed the required employee physical agility test, and extensive background test. You know, in all this time, Jack's dedicated an enormous amount of time participating in the field training programs after being hired as a reserve officer. And again, as I always say, during that evolution, it gives us a chance to actually see who it is that we're going to hire. And based on all of that, I highly recommend him to be a full-time officer. And I would ask you that in this case, where he's been on for about a year more than the next candidate I'm going to present to you, that you appoint him first on October 11th, or effective October 11th. And that would be a couple days before the academy day starts. The second candidate is here before you as well, Gage Russell. Again, same thing. Gage graduated with respect to the application process. Gage graduated from Wachusett Regional High School. He has a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from Worcester State University. He's been a public safety dispatcher with Leicester PD, public safety dispatcher with Princeton PD, and he was appointed a reserve officer in Lunenburg on July 18, 2017. And again, he went through the reserve training, 345-and-a-half-hour program. He's participated in our field training program and volunteered at numerous hours. Again, top-notch candidate, I believe. And I would recommend him to be appointed on October 12th, the day after Jack Hebert. And again, in fairness, Jack Wagner. In a fairness to Jack Wagner, where he's been here for a year longer than Gage, I would like him appointed first. That will give him seniority over Gage. And Gage and I had this conversation, so it's no surprise to me. And so that would be October 12th, 2018. And they're both going to start the academy the following Monday morning, the full-time academy. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Make a motion, we ratify the town manager appointment of Jack Wagner effective October 11th, and the appointment of Gage Russell effective October 12th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Welcome to the force.
Thank you for
you,
continuing
Chief.
to bring us first-class
Thank you.
candidates.
Yeah, they better remain first class. Do you want to discuss the mutual aid agreement now or later?
We'll get back to it. You got to hang around a little bit. I think there's one more appointment. You want to handle that one?
Yes. So it is for the interim building commissioner, Gary Rhodes. This is essentially a formality because his resignation came. And then he decided to stay on with us. So,
Or we won't let him go.
yes. So I'm asking you ratify that appointment.
I would make a motion that we ratify the town manager's appointment of Gary Rhodes as interim building commissioner.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
He so
Thank you.
impressed me with his earth permit work. I'm so happy that
Very
he's
thorough.
He's sticking. We're getting him to stick around a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you for your efforts.
Yep. And
Okay. Now we're going up to our 7:10 appointment on a presentation on conceptual designs and budget cost statements for consolidated municipal offices at the Passios Building by Wynick Haynes, Wynick and Smith.
these are all in your Google Drive.
This copy's
If,
being passed around. It should be the same information that you have on electronically. So what is in the presentation is an evaluation of the options written with a budget cost evaluation, so you would know what the numbers in the pricing meant. And then there are a site plan and a floor plan for each of the three options. So if we start with the first page that has the budget cost evaluation on it, to do the construction cost estimates, I went back to the study that was prepared by the Vertex companies in 2018, this year, and by the Tappe architects that had some cost information in their study from 2016. I determined $11 a square foot was seemed to be a reasonable number based on the Vertex company's study from last year, or from earlier this year. $9 a square foot for the building demolition. I came by that by, there was $6.20 per square foot in the Vertex company's study, but that was to demolish the entire building. And there was an 8.5 per square foot in the Tappe Architects study. That was to demolish 22,500 square feet. So the lesser that you demolish, the more the cost per square foot is. So I used a number of $9 there because that seemed to be reasonable for the amount of demolition that we're doing in smaller pieces. Then I took the construction costs that Tappe Architects had for 2016, put a 2-year escalator on it to bring it current, and then I added some things that were not in their cost estimate. You see there's $20 per square foot for roofing replacement, $8 per square foot for some plumbing system upgrades, $18 per square foot for mechanical systems, and $11 per square foot for electrical systems. Those numbers, aside from the roofing, are not totally what will be put into those subsystems, because the Tappe Architects price did include some money for it, but not to the level that we should be doing if we're doing a renovation for the long term. So that $168 per square foot was the number that calculated out to. That includes 15% for design and pricing contingency. It includes 10% for general conditions, 5% for overhead and profit, and 3% for bonds, insurance, and permits. All of those things that are normally in a construction project, as construction, part of a construction cost. You'll also see in the cost estimates a number for site work, and that includes any added surface parking, any site modifications for accessibility, walkways, and any other surface improvements. It does not include an underground electric service. I know there are utility poles that run down the drive now, and there's some discussion to put the electric service underground. That can be added. It's just, it won't affect the comparison of the three options because it would be done for all three.
And it's not essential, but it's been suggested.
It's, I think, yes, it's been suggested because there was some debate whether to do it or not I think when the boilers were renovated recently, or when the electric service was upgraded more recently. John Londa said that, it would be a good thing to do because the poles are now along the playfields, and if you could put it underground, it would be better. But again, he realizes that there's a cost associated with it that you might not want to take on. So
I don't remember, are all the poles underground at the middle high school?
they are above ground to the mechanical room area where the electric service comes in. I think there's maybe 3 poles from the street to that point. And they run right along the Passios building side of the driveway. So there's a play field right on the other side of the driveway, and nothing really on that side. So again, it's something that you can decide to do as you move along. The construction costs that I will present do not include the following items, which are project costs and are incremental costs that you would incur on any of the 3 options. So again, I didn't try to calculate what all these things would be, but just so you'll know, these are not included, which would be the professional services fee, the design fee, the abatement monitoring, a clerk of the works, whatever administrative costs you have locally, costs of financing, and there's probably other miscellaneous expenses, but just know that the costs we talk about do not include those things. Okay, so up to the option evaluation, and you may want to look at the drawings as we go with this. There is, as I mentioned, a site plan and a floor plan for each of the options. Option 1 is the option that was presented last time. And I've labeled it as a building with rental space and expansion space, so that there are those 6 remaining classrooms that I've labeled as unassigned right now that would be rental space. And then if you recall, in the municipal office wing, we matched up the spaces to the uses without moving the partitions around, knowing that the spaces were bigger than you needed for the program, but that builds in expansion for you. The option 1 includes the demolition of the small 1970s addition, mostly because it's not easily rentable, and it has building systems that are not the same as the rest of the building. That leaves approximately 49,850 square feet in the structure. Of that, 42,790 are dedicated to municipal offices, and 7,060 remain for potential income-generating space. And there I went into an explanation of why there is expansion space in the municipal wing, because the rooms are bigger than the program of spaces needs. The access from the classrooms to the gymnasium are past limited access spaces by municipal employees. It's the records area, the IT space, and the television studio, so it's not really a corridor that's accessed by the public, so there's less cross-traffic there. We've also added a door next to the door to the gymnasium, so we can separate off, if you will, the rest of the municipal offices from where the children will be. So the children will have access to the gym, and if they want, down into the cafeteria and the kitchen end down there, without too much disruption. I mean, I suppose there could be some people coming to cable access during the day. The budget for that option is $9,455,150, and that's using the cost per square foot that I summarized previously.
Can I ask, what work is done in the unassigned spaces?
It would be upgraded to whatever level the rest of the building is. I did have a further discussion with John Londa about that as to whether we could, in fact, keep that wing more like it is, and his opinion was that it wouldn't be attractive rental space if you did that, so. He knows the building better than anybody, so it's, the section option I've labeled as building with expansion space. Essentially, the 6 classrooms will be demolished, and the rest of the building will be retained. The same scenario for the office spaces, that the classrooms are used as the current size without adjustment of walls. Within that option 2, the same 1970s addition is removed, and then the additional 7,060 square feet for the 6 classroom wing, which leaves 42,790 square feet remaining, and all of that is dedicated to the municipal offices. The access to the gymnasium is essentially the same as the option 1. The cost of that option is $8,182,700, again, based on the parameters. Option 3, I've labeled building to space program. The difference here is that in the municipal wing, we've adjusted the spaces to fit the program so that there is no longer built-in expansion space through that wing. The demolition will be essentially all the way across the back in what was originally designed as the addition, but built at the same time. That leaves 37,980 square feet dedicated for the municipal offices. There is the access from the classrooms to the gymnasium are a little different in this option. They're much closer. There's also toilets that are being retained now because we don't have the toilets in the back wing. So there's an area there that would be considered a student area. The 2 remaining municipal spaces in there are the records room and the information technology and network space. Briefly to look at the differences in the site plans, essentially on the first option where it's got the most space and also has some space that would have potentially other tenants, we've increased the parking with the loop road around. In the other 2 sites, the loop road is eliminated with the additional parking in the back. There will still be the existing parking on the drive side that can be used by the superintendent's area with an access from the side. So that's why the differences in the site cost are that loop road in the option 1 and not in the other 2 options.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a couple
Please.
questions? Okay. Paul, could you explain in all 3 options how many square feet in the program there are for town offices, whether that includes cable, how many square feet in the program for school, and how many square feet for community? Because the total was 42,790 square feet in 2 of the options. The third was 37,980. I think
Okay.
it sounds, when you say municipal, but people need to know it's
Okay, I don't
it's
have
3 uses.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so the difference occurs in, so between option 1 and option 2, it's the additional space in the back. It's the superintendent's area and the 2 part of the superintendent's area and the 2 classrooms. The additional expansion space that's in the municipal wing. The rest of it stays the same, and I apologize, I don't have the number of the area of the gymnasium community space across the front, but it would stay the same. A gym that size it's approximately 8,000 square feet or so. And that wouldn't include any corridor space, so, but the Carter space, probably 10% of that kind of thing. So you're probably looking at 9,000 square feet for if you wanted to assign a number to the gymnasium, but I can get a more accurate number of that for you.
And the kitchen space as well would be
Right, the kitchen space.
community.
Right, so the large meeting room, hearing room is part of the program for the municipal offices, but it's bigger than it need to be for the program, but it works well as a space. So I will get the difference in that for you as well.
And I had one other question.
And then the difference between option 2 and option 3 are the fact that essentially what we took off the back that, and I do have the area of that. It's about 4,000 square feet in the back that's being removed, and that square footage is recovered in the municipal wing by adjusting the sizes. So it takes out the expansion space, but it eliminates it to be able to be demolished. I would point out that the records area is still in the program, and we're not moving it off-site someplace because it was able to be fitted here.
Just one more question.
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Wait, Town Manager had one more.
Sorry. You were involved in the Turkey Hill asbestos project. Does the $11 a square foot, does that equate to what the most recent project came out to?
Okay, I looked at that. The problem is the scope of work at Turkey Hill is not the same as what you'd be doing. There was a lot of pipe fireproofing on insulation on the steel beams. That was a bulk of what we were doing at Turkey Hill, maybe half of it. So it didn't, it wouldn't be a comparison one-to-one.
Okay.
So I didn't use that number.
Because it's a different kind of abatement?
Different kind of abatement, yeah. So at Turkey Hill, the steel beams are above the ceilings, and they have a spray-applied cementitious insulation on them, fireproofing. So that's labor-intensive to get that off the beams and then to put it back on again. And where you don't have that at Passios, and that was more than, I would say it's more than half of what the cost was over at Turkey Hill.
Just the labor intensity?
Right, and then the first project we concentrated, there were 3 projects that have been there. The first one was mostly to deal with the pipe, what do you call it? The steel beam insulation. The second 2 dealt more with the flooring and ceilings, which you would be dealing with flooring at Passios, but not so much with ceilings. So it's not really the same kind of work. And even the containment areas that you would be setting up would be different. So it wasn't a comparable type of a thing. And the Vertex studies seem to go into pretty good detail as far as what they understood to be what is tested positive and what hasn't. And they also included in their pricing an escalator for what has yet to be tested and might test positive. So I felt their number was probably pretty good. The problem I had with it is it was lower than you would use because it was for the whole building. So there's an economy of scale with their number, so I brought it up some. The $8.50 a square foot that Tapé Associates were using for 22,000 square feet, again, it's pretty close. That area is close to what you would do in option 3, but not so much in the other ones. And as I said, the smaller the project, the higher the price per square foot is. So I was trying to get an estimate there. So essentially, using Tapé's number and putting 2 years of escalator on it is about where we are. So that's...
Mrs. Adams?
Thank you. So I have a few questions. One, I feel like I remember when we did the Vertex when we talked specifically about different buildings, that they didn't really go in and do the specific analysis. So a lot of these buildings have not had an actual hazardous waste assessment. So I feel like there's still extraordinary amount of unknown to create these figures. But my main one question would be, does this project include new windows?
Okay, so it includes some window work, some has already been done. So I took TAPA's budget on that and used their numbers for that.
Okay, because I used to talk about the TAPE a lot, and I was always told it was just a conceptual. I feel like we're building concept onto concept without sending people in to really
That's what we're doing.
start to
yes.
get numbers.
Well, until you have a definite scope of work and get some schematic drawings done, it's really hard to put.
Right, because
And
whenever I would quote numbers out of the TAPE, I would be told from folks up here that, oh, you can't use those numbers, they're conceptual. So
Well-
now we're using these old conceptual numbers to build new conceptual numbers, and I feel like what we're coming up with is,
Well, there wouldn't be another way to get
like,
you.
should we just do a hazardous waste assessment so we know what we're really dealing with? In a building that age, like, if we're replacing windows, well, there's asbestos in the window caulking. So I
Right,
feel like
that has
numbers
not
could
been
just
tested yet.
explode as you start actually digging into the project.
Right.
And
So-
9.4 million could probably go to several more million real fast. And I don't want to move forward with something with concept onto concept.
Well, it's not unusual to do a building project this way. You've got to start someplace. And
I
you
guess
need
I
to
don't
get
know
a-
if the community is sold on this specific one, and I think it was a few weeks ago I made a motion to look for some conceptual pricing of other sites, and the TAPE has done that, and we've sort of buried those, because if we're spending 9.4 million here, there were other options with things like the Ritter, where 9.4 million could go, towards a really nice town hall at another site. So I guess I'm just still sort of in, like, I don't understand.
The reason you would use conceptual numbers, and the reason TAPE did, was to compare using square foot estimates before you get to the level of detail. The closest comparisons we have from TAPE is option 4 on TAPE, which was very similar in terms of structure to option 3 here. Okay? In TAPE, it was 4.7 million was a conceptual number based on an average per square foot. Okay?
That's why
Right.
that's why I went into the beginning where
Exactly.
I added things that they weren't doing.
Exactly.
That they should do. Right.
But when we say things like the Ritter, apples to apples, not meeting our needs, only meeting 2 out of 13 of our criteria, was 7.4 million in those dollars. All right? So that's why you use this. You don't spend a lot of money on engineering until you get an idea of which concept you're following.
I have
And
studied
then
this
you do
very,
your asbestos planning. All right? But it would be an incredible expense to do asbestos planning on all 5 options, down to the level of detail you're talking about. So you use things like dollars per square foot for asbestos
I
for
understand a lot of these things, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I would like to finish with my questions. There's sort of extensions of questions I asked last time, and we're really looking at a 55,000 square foot or potentially slightly smaller multi-use building, and I have a lot of questions on that, especially where there's potentially some school activities in here, like the ACE program, and the criteria for folks that come in contact with students to have undergone quarries and whatnot. And I see you've added, like, different accesses, because I had asked about, well, what about the students using the gym and sort of interfacing with the general public, and how that would play out. And then I don't know if you can just add doorways to restrict movement for, fire code and things. So I feel like I have a lot of just confusing safety concerns of using a space partially as school, partially as general public. That's one question specific to the building, but more importantly, I had asked questions last time, concerns about this building being sort of in the heart of what is like a campus where there's 2 playgrounds, maybe a skateboard park, the library, 3 through 12, and we're putting the general public and their traffic right in the center of this space where there's athletes and students walking to and fro, and dozens of children crossing this space each day to get to the Boys and Girls Club. So we're bringing in this traffic and these people into this space if we go with this sort of unnecessary plan to put it here in the first place. And when I look at this plan, the access to this building is Memorial Drive or the school driveway. It's not technically a road. The road that goes from Mass Ave to Oak Ave is the driveway, and there's lots of pickup and drop-off congestion that utilizes that. So then the only other egress towards it is Memorial Drive, where you're going to pass the Boys and Girls Club. A lot of people park around there to access the Eagle House, playground, maybe a skateboard park. And I feel like we're not talking about the overall safety and unintended consequences of using this space, and I am absolutely flabbergasted that a town wouldn't talk about things like student safety and security in a restrictive environment. And when we have beautiful parcels of land in town center, I have no idea why we'd abandon town center to do something like this.
So I would contend that this is town center. If you look at this town and community plaza, which actually TCP could be used for town and community plaza, you have in fact municipal offices, the PAC studio, school administration, the Boys and Girls Club, the library, the senior center, the skate park, Kids Kingdom, and a lot of green space that you could do concerts on and other activities. I contend that that is the town center.
Where is the green space? And, well, I guess another question is the skateboard park, their parcel of land, how does that interact with this possible additional parking? And I mean, I'm going to an 8-year-old soccer game, and I can't find a parking space in the current setup. And then back here behind the end that could possibly demo overflow teacher and student parking is there. I feel like we're unnecessarily, if you want to make this town center, well, I don't want town center in my school campus, so I just don't understand.
So I would suggest that we restrict our discussion to this conceptual plan and have a separate discussion of whether we should move along with this plan. Because right now, I was coming in here talking about which of the options do I think this makes sense if we were going to go through it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have the discussion about what we should be doing, although we've already voted to move forward with this as a conceptual plan. So I think that the concepts of, we should be looking at what the building uses are. I do wonder whether we should be talking to the school department and whether there should be students in this building. It just seems like it's a cross purposes for how this building is designed that could possibly reduce some of the additional cost as well.
And in all fairness, when you say focus on the concepts here, talking about traffic and how that impacts the school campus and how it impacts everybody coming on these roads is part of this concept. It's in the picture I'm looking at now. So whenever I speak, it's always put off as useless information, but how traffic is going to impact the school campus approaching our massive, $10 million redo of an old school when maybe we should redo it as a school. There's just a lot of things we can talk about, and I don't understand why we're not.
Can I ask a couple budget questions? Just interested in the, kind of at your square foot cost, what level of finish were you kind of assuming with the building? Is it, replacing all the floors, putting in new ceilings, updating all the finishes, or kind of retaining anything that's there?
Okay, so this is where I took, again, from TAP A, they did have a fairly, as I understood it, a fairly comprehensive interior finish package.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be, it'd be upgraded to what would be a new building level, I would think.
Okay.
They seem to have a large part of their budget went to that.
All right. And to build on that,
Yes.
Is it kind of, with your square foot assumptions, is it kind of blanketed across the whole building, or do you kind of
Yes.
look at the fact, say the gym, for instance.
Right.
In my own mind,
You
I wouldn't spend too much money on the gym, and even the cafeteria, maybe the new floor. But that's almost a quarter of the building that you're not doing the same level of work.
except for mechanical systems in there and electrical, and you've still got things to do in there.
I'm not saying you're not doing anything then.
You're correct. It doesn't apply. I did apply it everywhere. just because to do otherwise is going to be time-consuming and
absolutely.
not very productive to what you're trying to do here.
Right, I understand that'd be the next level of
Well,
detail. I'm
again-
just trying to identify if there's opportunities for value engineering when we get to that next.
That's why I laid out at the beginning where the $168 comes from. There's definitely, you can adjust that and do what you need to do with it. And the next step would do that, getting into building systems and how far you go with each one and how much of the existing you can actually retain, if any, as far as those go. So yeah, there can be some adjustments there. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't recall how much demolishing the whole building was going to be. You know, if you just...
Which whole building?
The whole
The
patios.
patios. You know, if you just got rid of patios, what's the
$3
price on
million?
that?
No, it was
About
about
$1
$1
million
million in abatement costs by itself.
And
So
then-
I don't know what the actual demolition was, but I remember it was 700 and something thousand in 2013 dollars just for the abate.
It
just
was
for the
the
abatement.
$6.25 times they were using 55,000 square feet, which I want to get back to in a minute. And that was for the demolition, and they had about 750,000 for abatement before that happened, so the two of those together is about $1.2 million, something like that. So if I'm doing it right, 6 times 50, I don't know.
So when you're looking at these prices, you
help me
really
with that.
kind of have to subtract
1.2-ish.
Right.
Right.
And the other thing is, like, you know, we keep talking about expansion space, and I don't want us to think about it that way, because the point of the matter is the original proposition that we approved to keep going forward on researching was option 4, which said demolish the back and go forward. And people said, boy, it would be nice to put the Boys and Girls Club in there, or boy, it would be nice to do this, or it would be nice to leave the gym. You know, and those things would be nice, they have a cost. The point of the matter is the program, if you will, that the town manager laid out for municipal office space, and then added to as a result of the school administration and PAC's request, is somewhere around 20,000, growing with the gross uplift to take into consideration hallways and common space, et cetera, to maybe 30,000. So off the bat, we got 27,000 square feet roughly sitting there that we don't have a plan for. So it's not really, we didn't build it to expand into, it's there.
Yes.
And we can say, is it a good use to use it for the Boys and Girls Club or something else? Or is it a better use to knock it down at a cost?
Right.
So just between option 1 and option 2, where they're getting rid of the 6 classrooms, the site work goes down 150,000 based on the fewer parking.
The road around the back, correct?
It also goes down $1.1 million in additional costs that you would have by fixing that or whatever it would be, having to
Right.
upsize systems.
Right.
So the question then becomes, you know, $1.2 million for 6 classrooms, what would the potential rental income coming back in there? I doubt that we would get any money to cover that cost.
See, but I wouldn't think, the point I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't make it well enough, is that I wouldn't consider that rental space. I would consider that excess space that we're determining do we have a use for, in which case we pay the money to finish it for what we're going to use it for, or we leave it the way it is, and if somebody wants to rent it as is, that's fine. I wouldn't spend a lot of money making it attractive to rent.
Right, but you have to do mechanicals, and you're going to get rid of the asbestos and everything,
Right,
so you don't do
right.
that later. So at that point, you have to at least do core and shell. So I agree with what you're saying, is that we need, that's why we come up with these different options.
Right.
You know, at this point, I'm leaning to, and I'm not just being a conservative here, I'm leaning to option 3, based on the current programs, because I don't have any other programs before me
Right.
that would fill that space.
Right, and I
You know,
think,
and I concur. I feel like option 3 is the most practical. You know, I don't want the town to be a landlord. We've got more buildings than we know what to do with as it is. So if we eliminated that, we'd get some more green space, maybe some more parking. And I like the fact that the town offices are put into spaces that fit their use now, because, nature doesn't like a vacuum. You give them a big room, it's gonna be full. And when they need more room, they're not gonna get rid of desks, they're gonna look for more room. So I do like option 3.
No, I think option 3 is good too. And this extra space, this space to grow or whatever, I always viewed that as kind of space for opportunity, as far as if someone has a community organization or a group that says, hey, we need some space, it'd be nice to be able to accommodate them. I don't think we need that space for municipal elements. But, and again, we do have the other buildings in town that have that opportunity for things to happen. If we have somebody with a grassroots effort or a community organization that has a great use for one of these buildings, we have that. So I think option 3 is most, cost effective and gets us where we need to be.
And I do want to get back to, at some point, the discussion with the school about actually having students in this, because I think that adds a whole different dynamic, as Ms. Adams has talked about, that when you cross over kids versus other.
And we are planning a workshop with the school committee, maybe that could be one of the agenda items.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, it's probably dictated by the laws of what if the students,
If they're there, you have to do a lot of things.
Right, it's dictated by what they need to be provided. And one thing this is 9.4 million for the entire space is very similar to the figures that I think were presented years ago as an option to keep this a school. And I just feel it's super, super ironic that we, ditched it as a school for exactly the same price or similar price that we're looking at to convert it into something non-school. And I think, this meeting with the school and sort of studying our numbers and our population boom, I know the incoming kindergarten class right now is extraordinarily large, and they're in kindergarten. That their class will grow, exponentially, each year as they typically
Not necessarily.
But that is a conversation for the school committee.
May I just finish my thought? And I think there is an opportunity. Never will we have the opportunity to expand the schools into a building at this point for $10 million. We really want to take a close look at the crowding situations. The 6 through 12 isn't going to last in our new building forever. There's some, lack of seating during certain lunches. There was lack of lockers last year. I know these things because I worked in the building, not because I make things up. And I think as a town, we've just really got to look at everything. And if this building can really get up to speed for $10 million, that's our least expensive option ever to create and keep space for student growth. And look at this, it's right here on school campus. So I would like to consider the renovation of this building as potentially accommodating school growth. If we really take a close look at our current population and what we expect.
That's a good discussion when we meet with the school committee.
Okay.
But I would say that it's probably not going to be $10 million for a school. This is $10 million for municipal services. It'd be different for a school. I don't know what it would be.
The school
May I ask the architect a
School
question, please?
gave this up. The school
It's
didn't want
just,
it.
it's planning
They
and
turned it-
questions. It's just brainstorming.
That's why we want to talk to the school about it.
But usually renovating something as its intended use is less expensive than a converting use. So keeping
I'm not following that, but go
keeping a
ahead.
building as it was intended is usually less expensive than converting a building to a new use.
We're gonna hold that discussion for when
This
we
is
meet with the
I
school.
have a question for the architect. See, I'm not allowed to speak up here. I'm not allowed to think. I'm not allowed to ask questions. It's getting absurd.
I'd like to hear his answer. You've cut him off quite a few times tonight.
So is your question is it less expensive to use more of the existing conditions because it's what the original use was and you're going to match it up with that? Most likely, yes. Your savings would be in the fact that you have the walls and the ceilings in place. You still got to deal with the flooring, which has asbestos in it. You still got to deal with the fact that the doors aren't the right size. You got to change all that out. So it's a limited amount of net difference. It's not like you would say walk into it and you're going to be able to reuse all these things, because you really can't. And the building systems that are there now are archaic and need to be replaced. So it's, regardless of how you use the building, there is a level of work that you have to do just to be able to occupy it again. Couple other, to go back to some of the questions you brought up earlier, there has been a lot of testing done. There was a whole list of things that are contaminated and another list of things that are not contaminated. They did mostly focused on the inside of the building and not so much on the outside, the roofing and the window caulking and such. The 55,000 square feet, I think, included the temporary classrooms back when this was, so that's not really a good number to use for the actual building itself. It's 51,500 is a good number to use for that. And whatever doors I show on the plan are definitely code compliant. You don't have to worry about that.
Thank you.
I think we're going to have to continue to talk about this in a lot of detail from a lot of different directions over the next couple of months. One of our hopes was to be able to be at a point to see if we were ready to make a next step at the special town meeting. It's my opinion that we're probably not. And I think that we should begin to work all these things, discuss them in detail, give it enough time on the agenda, and get to a point where we either make a total proposal for the annual town meeting in May, or abandon this plan and let somebody start over. But, I don't think we can change horses right now without doing all the work that was done towards this one. I don't think it's fair to say, let's go do what we're talking about at a different location without having studies like we've spent for TAP A and studies like we've spent for this assessment, and get to a point where we can get some architectural drawings and everything else and find out real costs, because the costs we're dealing with, I think they're appropriate for comparison purposes, even though they're 6 years old, but only for comparison purposes.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
I would say that I still support this as an option, but I think the additional work before I'm ready to go to town meetings, we have to have at least some conceptual uses of the Ritter Building in the town hall. Because that has been asked, continues to be asked, and for voters to make a comprehensive discussion, we need to, I think we've gotten to a certain point on this. We need to talk to the school department about how this works, and then we need to think about what are we doing in the rest of the building, because that is being asked, what are we doing if we move out of town offices?
Okay, Mr. Chair, if I may. You just talked about not having data on the other buildings. Other than this, which was funded, I think, through question 4, special town meeting in 2017. So this specific work, and I forget how much money that was it 40,000 or 50,000?
No, it was under 10.
So other than that, small amount of money moving forward in this, the TAPE and the Vertex studies all looked at a variety of the buildings we're talking about. So a lot of the data that we're putting into this specific site, we have similar data from the TAPE and Vertex for other sites. But, and also I just in the spirit of being consistent, I'd like to make a motion that we offer the town more than one conceptual pathway for the future of Town Hall.
Second?
Well, I'll second it for the purposes of discussion.
Well, I'll just say, again, the TAPE studied the Passios in much greater detail than the other buildings, because they did a blanket study of all of them. They recommended one, which was their recommendation. Independent outside group recommended the TC Passios. We agreed with them under their recommendation, and then they took it to the next level themselves. We do not have the line item cost per square foot information that we have for TCP for any of the other buildings. So we cannot simply just parlay it up like Ms. Adams suggests.
And I think it's important to note that the TAPE study used 13 criteria that the building reuse gave them to use. And the Passios met 13 of 13. The Ritter met 2 of 13. The primary school and town hall renovations combined met 4 of the 13. The primary school custom-built made 6 of the 13, and the primary school as a renovation met 4 of the 13. And then they added the costs of each of them, and the TAPE was the least expensive. And that's the reason we've been driving it as our proposed plan until we discern that it's not our proposed plan anymore.
And what we were doing is taking that and having an expanded program, but putting it on the same option that they recommended. So that's why if it seems like I'm going back to that, it's intentional. That's what we're asked to do. So it was, can an expanded program fit in the same space, essentially?
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I may. I carried the TAPE in my purse for a solid year, so I know it quite well. The $4.7 million for the TC Passios was for just a portion, I think about the just one wing of redoing. So the numbers tonight make sense because they're almost, double the 4.7 million. But when you looked at, I think it was option 2 or some portion of option 2, the 7-point-something million was for putting some millions into this building and some millions into the Ritter. And if you looked at, the square foot costs and whatnot, there were some options there that weren't half bad. If we're, spending 10 million, I certainly think there's other options in portions of the TAPE that worked.
The program didn't fit.
May I please just finish my statement and my thought? I've worked on this for a couple of years now.
I worked on it for 7.
Okay, well, you're not the king of Lunenburg, so I just
I feel
No, excuse me, I'm just trying to finish my thought. In regards to building reuse, and I respect your 7 years because, there's no YouTubed meetings, so I couldn't watch them. But I did read all the minutes of building reuse about 3 times so that I could respect and appreciate the process and have background information on it. So I don't just come here after 2 years versus 7. I've put all the thought into the background and building reuse. From what I could tell from minutes, because that's all I had access to, or reading the TAPE, they never studied Lunenburg's land needs. They didn't look at the needs of the school department. They just very specifically, looked at these buildings and what, after studying it so much, felt like a very arbitrary sort of way, because my mind constantly thinks of land. Do we need a better town common? The lower common feels dangerous. There's no parking. The tree lighting feels scary. Do we need more athletic fields? Do we need more open space? Do the schools need to expand soon? So building reuse, I would like to form a new building reuse committee and call it the municipal building and land use, because they really pinpointed very specific things without sort of rippling it out and looking at the long-term consequence of different things. And I really became fixated on studying what will Lunenburg need for.
We're in the middle of a motion and we're discussing that motion. Mr. McQuaid?
I mean, I don't know where to begin with the stream of thoughts that Ms. Adams just threw on the table, but the Building Reuse Committee had members from nearly every board and committee in town. The school board especially, the finance committee, we even had the historic commission on there, the planning commission. Everybody we could think to include, we included.
As well as experts
Well, there was,
who weren't on.
Please, Mrs. Adams.
I was going to say
And
7.
you cut me out every time, so. We did a lot of work, and I don't like the way it gets belittled constantly. You can't catch up on all that work that went into it through minutes. This was the recommendation by, TCP was a recommendation by a third-party independent person who looks at what's the best business decision for the town, and then we, as individuals from all those boards and committees, agreed with them and picked to move forward with this.
5 members of building reuse were friends and neighbors
I resent
out of
that.
7.
I resent that.
I would move the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Nay? Okay. I think we have a lot of work to do on this. I'd like to keep it on our agenda as a regular item. We'll discuss it further.
Do you have any other questions for Paul?
Thank you for the work you've done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. We have the town manager report.
Another favorite subject, the weather vane.
Not the restaurant, unfortunately.
It's not actually funny. It's a stolen artifact.
We can still have fun.
I'm trying to provide a little levity, but at the August 7th, 2018 Board of Selectmen's meeting, I reported that the town hall weather vane was last seen on top of the large safe in the town hall basement this past spring. I will restate that previous accounts that it may be at the DPW building or at the fire department are inaccurate. There were 2 companies that did work related to the mold remediation project in the basement, and both confirmed that they did not move or remove the weather vane. In July, the town manager's office contacted the chairman of the Historical Commission to request assistance from the Historical Commission in finding a company to make a replacement, and provided pictures of the old weather vane. The insurance company had also been contacted at this time about filing a property loss claim. We're awaiting a recommendation from the Historical Commission, who is meeting tonight, on a company to make the replacement and replacement cost, and this will be needed prior to submitting a property loss claim. And anyone with any further information, please contact the town manager's office. ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan Project Grant. An ADA planning grant and ADA project grant requests were submitted to the Massachusetts Office on Disability. The planning grant requests funding to pay Montechusett Regional Planning Commission staff to update the 2009 Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. The 2009 Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan only encompassed the municipal and school buildings that were occupied at that time. The planning grant I submitted requests funding to update our current facilities, parking lots, parks, and public access to buildings and parks. The project grants included ADA improvements at Turkey Hill, the Ritter Building, Town Hall, the Eagle House, TC Passios, North Cemetery, the Lane Conservation Trail and parking area for improvements there, the Cowdery Trail and parking area improvements at that property, and improvements to the trail at the small town forest. The total funding request for both the ADA planning and project grants is $130,485. Applications will be reviewed from now until December, and we will receive notification of award or denial by December 3rd, 2018. Complete Streets Tier 3 grant application. The Complete Streets Tier 3 project application and supporting documents were successfully uploaded through Mass DOT's Complete Streets portal. The total request for funding for Complete Streets construction work is $375,602 for the projects that were outlined at the September 18th Selectmen's meeting. Representative Benson's office has provided a letter of support that was also included in the application. An update on the Regional Animal Control Facility. The architect is currently accepting proposals from geotechnical engineers to perform test borings, and the person would also provide a written report on the findings for the site identified as the optimal location for a future regional animal control facility. And for everyone's information, that site identified is behind the Public Safety Building. An update on the Summer Street project. Pavement reclamation began on Monday, September 24th, on the Fitchburg end of the project. The contractor will be pulverizing from Rockies Plaza to the Bakers Brook Bridge. The contractor will then remove excess material and shape the road over the course of the next week or so, 2 weeks or so. It is anticipated that they will be paving this end of the project to intermediate grade during mid to late October. Drainage structures will be raised to intermediate grade for the winter. Installation of the drainage main in Lunenburg was expected to be finished by September 28th. Installation of the catch basins tying into the new main will begin in mid to late October. The contractor is anticipating having a crew begin doing work on the Bakers Brook Bridge in October. An update on the Chase Road project. Since reporting on the completion of the Chase Road project at the August 21st meeting, and that imperfections were noticed by the DPW director, among others, the DPW director has been corresponding with Mass DOT to complain about the final product and advocate for fixing it. Mass DOT did a rideability test in one of their trucks designed to calibrate the smoothness of the road and found a section of the road did not meet the standard. This section of road is currently being remilled and repaved this week. Get Connected Communications Questionnaire. As part of the new website's Get Connected component and the goal of outreach, I created a communications questionnaire accessed through the Get Connected portion of the website and shared it on the town Facebook page to ascertain the primary sources of communication people currently receive their news about town government and the type of town government information people are most interested in receiving. We have a total of 70 responses so far. And in response to question 1 about how people receive information about town government, 54% of the respondents receive information through town social media accounts. 45% of respondents receive information through the Lunenburg Ledger. 31% of respondents receive information through the town website. 15% of the respondents receive information through public access. And 15% of respondents receive information through Discussing Lunenburg. My goal would be to use this information to create further surveys on new ways to engage with the public and increase the number of people we are reaching through our communication tools. An update about the Capital Planning Committee. The Capital Planning Committee met tonight and discussed the status of the fiscal 2019 capital plan projects. To date, the police department boat, ATV, and cruisers have been purchased. The 2 DPW vehicles have been ordered. The Turkey Hill asbestos abatement project is complete. The modular trailer behind the TCP has been demolished. The primary school's phone system install is complete, and the ladder truck has been ordered. The Capital Planning Committee has set a schedule of meetings and will begin meeting with departments on November 6th and wrap up by the beginning of December. At their next meeting on October 16th, they will discuss a list of priorities for use of the funds appropriated towards the Turkey Hill asbestos abatement project that can be reappropriated towards another capital project. And that would be because funds were included in the state budget for that project. Some highlights from the most recent department head meeting on September 25th. The regional assessor met with the Department of Revenue last week to finalize valuations as part of the recertification of assessments required by the Department of Revenue. And this is done every 5 years to certify that we are assessing at full and fair cash valuation. Motor vehicle commitments will be sent out on October 4th, totaling $79,779. An update from cable. The cable coordinator reported that they are currently working with Comcast on a 3rd channel that will be for education, including school committee meetings, but are looking for additional content for this channel. Staff is currently receiving training on the remote wireless system and programming. They're working on programming that includes a botany series and a program with the superintendent. Council on Aging. The Council on Aging director announced the action group for becoming a dementia-friendly community has been established and will have their first meeting on October 10th. The first memory cafe, which happened on Friday, September 24th, I spoke to the director after that, and it was a success. So very thankful that she's moving forward on becoming dementia-friendly. In other news, the Senior Work-Off Program will be ending in November, and the Senior Work-Off Program Committee will be accepting applications for the commencement of the program in January. Applications can be obtained at the Senior Center, and we will work on putting those on the website as well.
It's actually the senior tax work-off program.
Yes,
It works
okay.
off the tax, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, senior work-off.
It'd be a workout program.
Like a workout
Right.
video.
The DPW director has been involved in the Summer Street project and following up with Mass DOT on the Chase Road project. And the DPW is still significantly understaffed right now with 5 vacancies, 3 of which are currently being advertised. The police chief continues to work on their accreditation. And Officer LaChance graduated from the academy on September 14th. Another officer is in the academy right now, and the 2 officers appointed tonight will be attending starting October 15th. The land use director reported that workshops on permitting adult use recreational marijuana have commenced. And also in planning board news, the Settlers Solar special permit hearing has been continued until October 22nd. Fire chief, the ladder truck has been ordered and she reported under the capital planning, and it has a 300-day lead time. And currently there's 1 firefighter in paramedic school. The treasurer collector has finalized all of the end of the year reports that are submitted to the Department of Revenue and is now working on tax takings. The finance director reported that she was finalizing the end-of-the-year reports to the Department of Revenue to certify free cash and has since submitted with a balance of $1.3 million to be certified as free cash. The IT director is working with a company to assess the town's toner usage and getting a proposal to move to managed print services that would cover all our toner purchases. And the next department head meeting will be a management training through the town's employee assistance program on October 29th. In announcements, town council has office hours Tuesday, October 16th, 2 to 6 p.m., Tuesday, November 27th, 12 to 4 p.m., and Monday, December 17th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And for vacancies, I'll be announcing these at each of our meetings. We still have a vacancy for the building commissioner position. Local building inspector is being advertised. Town mechanic, assistant town mechanic, heavy equipment operator, laborer. And for committees, agricultural commission, architectural preservation district commission, cultural council, public access committee, and zoning board of appeals. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Can I ask you a couple questions? On the animal control building, is it anything like the facility at Monty Tech? Is any, the one that is just opening?
The veterinary clinic? No. No, that's for teaching. I was,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it'll be housing.
And when was the reassessment completed?
The regional assessor met with DOR last week.
But I mean, when did they do all of the reassessment work?
Over the course of, they hire a firm and they go out and do the assessments.
Do you know when they?
Properties. I don't. I could find out.
Okay. No, I was just curious because prices have been really going up quickly, I think. So I was wondering if they caught that wave or if we got a wave before.
It would be recent, so that's why they do the certification of the values to make sure they're fair. The market.
Really going up towards the end of the summer, I thought. On the questionnaire that you have, were there any hard copies placed anywhere, or was it all online?
No, there are no hard copies right now. We could place some around town.
You're only going to get people who go online.
Right, so you're missing data from people who don't use that source.
Right. Oh, and I do appreciate having the town council hours laid out a few months in ahead. I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
The only comment I would make, 2 comments. Chase Road, the remilling is not being done at the cost to the town. The Department of Transportation is in charge of that, and I assume they're going back against the contractor for that. And just managing people's expectations on Summer Street, it's not going to be a perfect road by the end of the year. It's going to be a passable road, and this is really a multi-year process. Hopefully next year, 2020, is when it should be completed, right?
Is it passable at all now?
Oh, you can get by it, but what I'm saying is that it's not going to be it's still going to be a rough pavement. It's not going to be a smooth pavement like Chase Road, which wasn't quite so smooth.
Like Mass Ave. Parts of it.
Thank you.
Okay. First item of old business is a discussion about the proposed townwide noise bylaw. I guess
I would
that's
ask the police chief
Yeah.
to present on that.
I don't know anything about it.
You definitely had help from town council on this.
Yeah, I don't even have to.
It's a lot of legalese.
There's nothing really more to say other than we just went over it and he had some suggestions to make and we finalized it. And I believe you, did I give you a copy of the?
Yes.
I don't have it with me, I forgot it. He made some changes he thought were necessary. And I don't have it with me, so I can't even really discuss it. I totally forgot about it.
Oh, I had one question. Under 7, is that okay?
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
7's under permits. It says whether the cost of compliance will cause an applicant excessive financial hardship. Give me for
Well,
instance.
Well, I don't know, some
Where's he doing?
people want to have an event, but they don't
So,
have the money to
Fundraiser
pay
type
for the
of deal.
permit. I mean, you might have some nonprofit or something, where you might, in other words, maybe it's a food bank or something, they're trying to make as huge a profit as they can, put on an event to do that, and they're telling you that they'd like to use all of the profit to buy food for people. I'm just throwing this out, I'm making this up in my head, but, so.
But
they
it's under noise control though, right? It's a permit, I guess I'm assuming it's a
Well, that's a
permit to make
special
noise.
permit?
No, it's a permit for an activity which would otherwise be forbidden. So if you go to,
do you want a copy?
Yeah, no, it's all right.
He's seen it enough.
so construction of, say, construction equipment. I don't know if there would be a permit for that. You could theoretically give a permit to do it at different hours, if it'd be expensive, but I don't know that. Fixed plant equipment would probably be the other part. So if you have a manufacturing facility, if there was a permit that was going to create, technically, permits could be given to give.
I thought you meant the special permit, I thought you was referring
No,
to the
it's-
special permit.
No, it's all under
I
the
think,
noise
without
control
looking at it, I'm
bylaw.
thinking, what you're talking about is, all right, say somebody's septic system fails, and they need to do an emergency repair on it at night, and it's gonna make a lot of noise, because you're gonna have a backhoe in the backyard, right?
But this is all about noise, right? This whole
But-
thing's
so-
about noise?
So it's a permit for an activity that would be otherwise forbidden. So what Jim was just saying, so if you're going to put in an emergency repair to a septic system that was going to make a lot of noise,
At night.
we could theoretically give a permit to allow that, even though it would be a violation of the bylaw otherwise. But that's if it cause excessive financial hardship.
Yeah, and there is something that says if it's, since it's an emergency,
So in other words,
but it just sounded weird to me. The cost of compliance will cause the applicant excessive financial hardship.
so in other words,
I'm
Bob,
just
you-
trying to figure that out.
I think we need to get that from town council or another town that has done this.
I mean, it may be in the state law and everything, but I'm just looking for instance. you
Yeah.
know?
well, I mean, all right, I was gonna make a joke about your example.
No, right, yeah, no.
Not right now. All right. No, I mean, that would be an example, right? I think based on what you're saying, is if I went to get a permit, I couldn't afford it because I can't afford a septic system, I gotta do an emergency repair anyway. Maybe I'd ask is that what you're talking about? To give it?
No,
don't
it's
charge
in
me for it?
the noise control
No.
bylaw.
Yeah, I know it is.
So it's,
But
I
you're gonna
mean,
make
there is something in there, and I can't remember where it is exactly now, but if it's an emergency repair, like if the police have to respond to something and their sirens are going off, that's too
That's
bad, it's an
exempt.
emergency.
There's a list of
Well, that's
8
an
exemptions
exemption.
on page
Right,
5.
I
right.
think what you're referring to is you gotta apply for a permit because you're gonna make some noise after, say, 7 o'clock at night that's otherwise not allowed, right? Am I right, Bob?
Yeah, another one would be commercial deliveries or pickup. So if there was some reason why somebody had to deliver North End Auto cars and the truck was coming and had to be at midnight instead of the next morning. Theoretically, we could give a permit to allow the unloading, which would create a lot of noise. Now, whether we would do that is a different question. But I think that's the type of thing, so that a permit could be given for any of the other things to allow a noise otherwise prohibited.
All right, I get it.
But the
I know
excessive
what you're saying.
financial hardship thing is what I'm
I
having.
remember that now,
Right,
yeah.
and so in that case, they could wait till 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning at no cost, unless they had to go someplace else and they would lose $5,000, so we'd make that case. I doubt that there's going to be a time when we do it, but the assumption is this would allow you to do it, but it's only going to be a major cost.
You would have liked the joke. So let's not dwell on the exception to the rule.
So just to frame this, this is work that you've done to make a noise, what is it now, ordinance?
No,
bylaw.
Ordinance. And it's going before the special town meeting.
Right.
Okay. And this is the version we're looking at here is the one that you've worked with town council to edit, and you guys feel that this is the right one?
Right, yes.
Okay.
I sort of have another question. The hours 10 PM and 6 AM. It's like people can use their power lawnmowers at 6 o'clock in the morning? That seems early.
I'm up at 4:30.
Well,
Are you mowing your lawn at 4:30?
a lot of what it is landscaping people out there that have,
But at 6?
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems excessive, you know,
they're out mowing lawns in the rain at 6.
So we could make an amendment to change it to a different time.
well, it was, you know, it had been 8 PM to 7 AM, and it was crossed off.
We didn't have it, we don't have any now, though, correct?
Right.
So
We don't have-
anything we put in place is an improvement upon the ability to enforce
Right, we have
something of which
we
was
have-
nothing.
Right, we have nothing, and
But
here's the
what I
thing.
just mean, in the writing, it's 8 PM to
Well, that was
7 AM.
one version
That was
suggested the
Taken
first
from,
one.
taken
Right.
from another town.
The decisions to do that, the decision, the hours, that's a pretty standard, thing, 10 to 6. Town council will tell you that. The reason you don't push things up to 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning is because it may not withstand a court argument.
Then you'll be chasing complaints constantly.
That we may not be able to be successful at, enforce or prosecuting. So, you want to be reasonable. And landscapers they have to make money, so they get out early, and they do make noise with lawnmowers. I mean, that's just one example. Contractors do the same thing, because especially in this, our daylight saving is in this part of the country is not, our construction season is short, so they have to make hay while the sun shines, so to speak. So I think that's where all this comes from, and that's what it was explained to me by town council. That you have to do this to be reasonable. So
It may cause a financial hardship to have to wait till 7.
Well, yeah, it would. It would. So, you want it to be able to withstand muster, so to speak.
I guess, but it still seems awfully early.
It does seem early.
Especially with those silly blowers. God, can't you get a rake?
But right now, we could get out there and mow at 3 AM if we
That's right.
wanted.
That's
Nobody can
right.
do anything about it.
Theoretically. you
Might go
could.
home and mow it at midnight.
I think this is ready to go to town meeting and for
I
the
agree,
discussion.
and I
I mean,
think these kind of discussions will occur at
At town meeting.
I mean, he was very thoughtful about this, and this isn't the first time he's had to address this kind of request. And he gave me numerous examples, and, there's a lot of thought put into it, actually, so that we don't hurt anybody, but yet we can protect people as well.
the other thing is, this isn't a public hearing on this, but I think that with the final version, not the red line version, but the final version going on the website so that we can then, because we'll have another time to go over all the articles because we haven't taken a position on this, but
Right,
to allow public to make comments on it as well before town meeting will be helpful.
agreed.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have something in the ledger as well. It'd be great to have it printed in the ledger.
Okay. All righty, so agreed, we will see it again as part of the warrant, the final warrant package, but great job, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a
Well,
it's a
thank you,
great
Adam.
thing.
Adam.
Long time coming.
Adam was really,
All righty, now, the next item is a discussion about entertainment license and proposed special event permit. So you may want to hang around for that. Adam Burney's going to lead us through that one. This one is not a warrant article, but it is under the purview of the Board of Selectmen.
Do we have anything written?
It's in the package called Special Event Draft
Two.
2.
So we had talked about
Okay.
this a few months ago, and you guys had some comments, and so I went back and thought about those and tried to add them in. The last time I was here, I had an application that went along with it. I didn't bring that back because the only thing I modified was adding a start and end date. As we had talked about, some of these events may be proposed to span multiple days, and that was sort of lacking on the application. So what we tried to do is be a little more specific about indicating what's a special event. Excuse me. And trying to limit it to maybe if the event occurs twice in a year, you could give it a special event permit. If it's happening more regularly, then it's just an event and it needs to be at a venue that's there to sort of host it. Taking the hours and turning it into timing, and limiting events, special events, to a 4-day time limit. We talked a little bit, there was a pretty good discussion about a fair or something like that may last over a longer period. And, I'm, again, willing to discuss this, and I guess ultimately you have to issue the permit, so the rules have to fall into what you guys feel is appropriate. But I honestly don't see us hosting something that's like a 2-week-long fair that's going every day. And if, let's say, a carnival came to town and wanted to locate, they're probably going to run a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and maybe the following Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so maybe it's 4 consecutive days.
The Marshfield Fair goes more than 2 weeks.
Correct, but
That's on a fairgrounds.
I was going to say, Topsfield, the Big E, we're not running that kind of.
At the Lower Common.
I mean,
That's not a we, that could be an individual choosing to do that.
theoretically.
That's what this is supposed to cover.
And is that also something we have the infrastructure or the desire to host? And I guess the feeling I've gotten is that while the town has indicated in a lot of different spheres that they're open to having more people come to town, having more civic events, the impact of an event that's long running isn't something that they feel they want to put up with the ramifications of.
But do we have the ability to say no to it, is the question. That's the legal question I have. Certainly we could, by zone for a fairground like Bolton Fair and things like that, that this is the struggle that the selectmen have had, that we cannot turn down an event we can put reasonable regulations on. So I would just...
On entertainment, on the entertainment license, you could also...
I'm just asking...
Yeah, and it's a reasonable question.
Yeah. Before you go on, the other question I had when I read it, a special event no more than twice a year, you could have one type of event and then have a different type of event, and they wouldn't be the same twice a year limit.
Correct.
Okay.
And I guess what my intent was that if a property came in and said, we're going to have a road race, and they're going to run through our property because we've got big enough property that we can have a road race. That's one type of event. If that road race happened every weekend, then that becomes a regular event. If there's multiple types of events held by multiple organizations at a singular property, that's a zoning issue at that property, but those events attracting larger numbers of people are still special events in a way. And the school would probably be a good example of that, because there's going to be, Miles for Miles happens every year. The color run, all of those are separate events that get held in similar common space. So I think the event itself is more the issue than it is where it's held. And, I can try and clarify that in the language. Let's hope I remember what these crazy words mean. Then we talked a lot about alcohol and drug use. And so I added the drug use into the title. I do have some questions, and I'll have to verify this with town council on part of it, but we added in the idea that they had to follow the policies and procedures. In reading your policies and procedures, BYOB needs to be issued to a restaurant common victular holder. So a special event couldn't be BYOB as far as I'm to understand it.
Good
Because it's open to
That's
the
the way it
general
is
public.
today,
Well,
that's
no,
what we're
but-
going to
but-
look at next week.
There's a one-day liquor license, which actually, according to
But that
the state, can be multiple days.
But
So
that
doesn't have
requires
to
a
be.
distributor.
Yes,
That's not-
they would have, but
They'd
it
have to
can,
be-
but they don't have to have a liquor license to have, they actually can't have a liquor license to get a one-day permit.
Correct.
So-
Correct. But
But that's not BYOB,
But
right?
you can't be.
BYOB is separate.
Yes, and that's only for common victular holders.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have to,
At present.
at present, and if you change, we can certainly amend this.
But so that's a permit, but if you didn't have a permit, what's to say that somebody couldn't bring their own alcohol to a private site? You need to ask town council whether that can be, I understand the whole concept, you can't have a BYOB without a permit.
But I think where it's,
It's consuming alcohol on private property. I understand it on public property.
but I think it's the open to the public, where it becomes similar
That
to,
goes back to the very first, because I'm concerned with the very first paragraph. What's a special event? And it says for free or for fee, open to the general public. I
so
think that's the term of art, is open
if
to
you
the
have your
general
friends
public.
over and everybody brings their favorite beverage, that's not an issue because it's not a special event.
It's an invitation.
You're a private party in a private space doing legal activities. It's we're going to allow, you open your doors and say, hey, Lunenburg, come on in, see my house and visit with us. And, if you want to bring a bottle of whiskey and sit at my table and drink, go for it. I think you then run into that's where I think the public issues come, because if that were the case, then any restaurant could just have BYOB without any need for
Right.
permitting.
I think this will be a good thing as part of our workshop on the, let's see if we may have to address this.
And we talked about, or I added in banning recreational drugs at these special events. And I guess, being that recently Boston had the Freedom Festival or whatever that apparently trashed the Common, which is a special event and, is centered around recreational drug use, on private property, could we prohibit it? I would expect that we could, if it's open to the general public, similar to BYOB, because you then create a public space, and our general bylaw for the consumption of THC in public would take over, but I'll verify that.
Would they be able to consume marijuana if it was sold for a fee similar to alcohol?
I would imagine that would not be allowed because you'd need a vending license from the Cannabis Control Commission to...
A portable license? Just want to be consistent.
We're talking about not allowing portable sales of marijuana in town.
Okay.
Yeah, but we haven't done that yet. so-
Correct.
Right.
We don't allow any sales in town, so that's not an issue right now.
You got to really look at the marijuana because since it's allowed, I understand the public access and other stuff like that, but if we send the message, you can drink, but you can't smoke marijuana, we're doing double.
Well, and I think
I've
that
got issues with that.
if we look at that from the state level, the state is sending that message right now because they issue sales and consumption licenses for alcohol, but there's no vehicle for public consumption of marijuana. And I know that the Cannabis Control Commission is in, I don't know if they've started discussing it, but they're planning on discussing it in the near future. And that was one of the things that they rolled back in their initial rollout. So I think that there'll be a longer term discussion about that. I think in the short term, we're probably on pretty stable ground. But again, I'll verify that next 2 weeks with town council. We talked about accessibility, so I added a section about accessibility. Essentially that special events aren't exempt from it. They need to provide accessible parking, paths, restroom facilities, and other reasonable accommodations as required. Sort of as a catch-all, most of these places are going to have this as a matter of course, especially if they require building permits for certain things, but it gives everyone the heads up that that's something that's necessary.
So Stillman's Country Fair would fall into this special event,
Correct.
and where they'd have to make things accessible.
In some manner.
I go back to restrooms, clean, trash cleanup, temporary toilet facilities must be cleaned daily. The part of and then daily trash pickups, part of the issue becomes whether it has to be daily as opposed to,
Or as
maybe
necessary.
as necessary, so, because you may, if it's not used heavily, then you may be increasing the cost of the applicant. There has to be a word of art that would talk about, when the Board of Health would probably have some input on that. Fireworks, you may want to have a throwaway line that's saying that public officials may choose to have fireworks, because the town's 250th anniversary, we had fireworks on the football game, so.
So fireworks are not permitted within the town of Lunenburg.
Unless we say so.
Out.
Unless we say so.
But without appropriate license, because
Right, there you go.
you can
Yeah,
license
yeah.
those through the fire department, and
Right.
you pay tens of thousands of dollars, and people with more degrees than sense sometimes come out and shoot them off.
And is the insurance amount of $1 million?
That's what
the
I've
standard?
seen across multiple communities, and I think that it seems pretty standard.
And workers' compensation instead of workmen's.
Where does it say workmen's?
Just before additional permitting on the last page.
There's so many words.
Keep adding.
I should be, that should be workers. I should be more concise. And then obviously I had a campground into the permitting just because that's a heavy lift. I know we have the catch-all of anything else that may be necessary, but I think adding campground in there is important. There's a whole CMR on campgrounds, and it's fairly lengthy and fairly specific, and not necessarily the easiest to obtain, just by product of the requirements within it. And I think that the conventional wisdom, we had some discussion about how this would get processed, is having the necessary department heads meet with the applicant tends to make the most hay out of the situation. I probably don't need to tell you, but oftentimes applicants over or under exaggerate the scope or impact of something that they're proposing, and the ability to interact and ask questions and play off of different requirements and find happy mediums between maybe what the police chief may need for access or may want for limit of vehicles, and what the fire department may need for access, or what the Board of Health requires and the building department require. There's often a lot of discussion amongst department heads and the applicant that sort of ferrets this out and kind of gets everybody to the best solution for minimal impact and maximum fun.
So the other things that are not on here would be buffer zones requiring a plan to show where things are going to happen, closeness to wetlands, roads, houses, things like that. So I don't have a suggested way to do that, but
I might have a little experience in
yeah, I
in
think
that.
the planning board does a little bit of that, yeah.
And, I guess buffer zone, I think is a touchy subject. And
But no buffer zone, 1 foot, is not acceptable.
correct.
So-
You say buffer zone, and what I'm hearing is from appurtenant uses, whether it's residential, commercial, road, otherwise. And I think that is appropriate in some way. And I guess I would look for some thought from the board on what their take on it is. And I agree, putting the bandstand on the property line is probably poor form, and it's going to be a problem. I also think that a preset buffer zone could be harmful in some situations. You may have a use where it's located somewhere that there isn't necessarily a need for a buffer zone. And maybe it's more of a statement of respectful distances without a prescribed distance.
The only thing I'd say, though, is that you've got 5 members here going to make a decision.
And I'll get 10 answers.
And the applicant coming in really should
Yes.
know what the standard is. And
Okay.
It may need to be a reasonable, but there's got to be something that's going to give guidance to, when are we going to say no? That's the ultimate thing.
Depends on
Or
what you
when
ask
can you
for.
say no?
And I think a plan is reasonable, houses, wetlands, as necessary. And, I think with the plan, I've got a pretty good idea of what we may want to see and what would be required. And we can probably fit that into the application, along with sort of a statement of who would be reviewing it and some sort of flow chart of how it would work. Like we discussed last time, we talked about 60 days prior to the event filing. That gives this board probably a hearing 30 days before the event for, the applicant to come in, us to set up a meeting, maybe hash out any issues, maybe have a second meeting as necessary, file a memorandum to the board outlining what the issues, what the concerns, what the outcomes are, others things maybe that they would be looking for. And it gives the applicant time to start other permitting processes as necessary.
And so you've got, after 8 PM and before 7 AM, we probably ought to be consistent with our proposed noise bylaw.
Yes, and I did that sort of in anticipation of.
Because that
So,
says,
he had 10 a.m.?
no, 7,
He had 10
6
PM
AM.
and
10 PM, 6 AM.
So,
10 PM, 6 AM.
so
You're right.
we
Should be
have-
the-
whether those are
should
the
be
right
consistent.
numbers or not, but
Well, but
you don't
it'll
want
at
them
least
to
be
do
consistent for now.
leaf blowing for the first hour, and then they can have the amplified.
Yeah, my favorite.
All right, so we're almost there.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to review this. I didn't see it up on,
Now, we're doing a workshop next week on the policies that we haven't done yet, most notably the liquor ones and social media, but
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks from today, I'm sorry, next workshop.
You're not meeting next week?
We're meeting
Yes.
next
Not a
week.
workshop.
Oh, no, next week's a real
Yeah,
meeting.
our next workshop is 2 weeks from
Okay.
now, and we're doing that. I don't know,
Do you want me to
it'd be
flip
great if
this
you have it.
around and come back?
It'd be great.
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause then we can
I
put
won't
that
have
up,
town
yeah.
council answers till that day on certain things. But, I mean, that's, easy enough. And, we'll see what I can get from the Board of Health on the trash pickup, but the rest of it, I should be able to
Okay.
put something together and I'll,
On this one, I think we need to go to public comment, post it, even though we adopt our own policies. But this one is affecting people in town. I think that this one, before we adopt this one, I'd like to really seek a
All
lot
right,
of
so
public.
then let's separate it from the workshop and
Yeah, right.
do
I mean,
it,
if
when-
you-
do it when you can, and we'll post it and have.
I was
a
gonna say,
pub-
if you'd like, I can come back and we can
No.
do it at the workshop and finalize it, and then you can. be
If you want to
comfortable
use
with
that
where it
night
is.
while we're in a policies frame of mind.
Yeah.
I do, I want
That's
all the
fine.
wonk I can get out of the 5 of you.
If you could give it to us a few days in advance, that'd be
I'll
fabulous.
do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
I'd like to move up current business number 4 so that we can let the chief conclude his business. That's a discussion about the police mutual aid agreement with Middlesex. If you're enjoying yourself, we could just leave it in order.
I'm just going to talk about history. Kind of a history buff.
Now, interestingly, this is a mutual aid agreement with Middlesex. Do we have one with Worcester?
We do.
All right,
I have a desk full of them,
okay.
actually.
Have we been involved in this before, or is this new?
Not this one, this is new.
Okay.
This one, I have about 7 or 8 already that we've signed.
Are they very similar?
Yes, they're all, though. This is a more modern version of a mutual
The
aid agreement.
same
No.
rules,
the
pretty
law's
much,
been
or-
changed.
There's some things that are different.
Yeah. That's
Do you want to say anything about it, or you want us to jump in?
No, well, while you have questions, let me just give you
Sure.
my argument here.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't even be an argument. This is, I don't even want to get into the politics. We shouldn't have to do mutual aid agreements. There should be statewide powers of arrest. It's a whole other ballgame. But anyways,
We can't solve that one, can we?
we've been trying to. Anyways, in my opinion, the proposed agreement's acceptable in its present form. But nevertheless, I'll speak to the one issue that seems to be in question by offering some anecdotal information and some history behind making the mutual aid agreements made under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8G. As a result of a proposal by the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police, the governor signed into law Chapter 124 of the Acts of 2003 by inserting in Section 1 the word towns, in line 2 the words including cities and towns, in states contiguous to the Commonwealth. Let me just talk about that one line. That wasn't in there when most of our mutual aid agreements were made. They added that because they felt that there was a need to give the police powers in towns like Townsend, for instance, who border towns like Brookline, New Hampshire, to enter into agreements so that they can make extraterritorial arrests if the need rises over state lines. So contiguous, that's where that language came from, contiguous to the Commonwealth. In Section 2, they added the sentence, when providing such mutual aid, police officers shall have all immunities and powers granted to them in the municipalities that employ them, including but not limited to the powers of arrest. The following paragraph was also added by Chapter 124 of the Acts of 2003, approved on April 23rd of 2004. While in transit to, returning from, and during a mutual aid response for another city or town, a participating police officer shall maintain the right of indemnification granted by law or by his home city or town or both for all claims arising out of any action within the scope of his employment in accordance with a valid mutual aid agreement. A mutual aid agreement may provide for methods of activation. This is added in 2004, April of 2004. Provide for methods of activation or requesting and responding to mutual aid requests. The agreement may also address issues such as pay and benefits for officers, insurance, indemnification, injury compensation, and other operational matters relating to police services provided for mutual aid responses. Nothing in this paragraph shall be construed to expand or otherwise modify existing police powers as provided by law or any existing mutual aid agreement or both. Now, the changes were prompted by cases such as Commonwealth versus LeBlanc. That was a big one in Natick. Commonwealth versus Grise, Commonwealth versus Andrews. Based upon on these decisions, this was back in 1986. And prior to the changes in 48G, the only way to present a successful legal challenge to an arrest made in another jurisdiction by a sending department was to have all the signatory communities appoint the other communities' officers as specials. Hence, every year, there's 2 lists that come out, one of which isn't even necessary. Townsend PD sends you a list asking us to get sworn in. So doesn't Shirley. We do not have a mutual aid agreement in Shirley. It's a Middlesex County town. Townsend is a Middlesex County town, but we do have a mutual aid agreement. There's no need for us to get sworn in. I presented that argument. Nobody seems to want to listen to it. Nobody ever gets sworn in. Not even necessary. So, since the amendments to Chapter 40, Section 8G, recent case, Commonwealth versus Gregory Bartlett, affirmed the authority of the police to take extraterritorial action under a mutual aid agreement. In the Bartlett case, this was a Methuen officer, pulled a defendant over in a neighboring town because he was driving erratically. The officer had reasonable suspicion that the defendant's driving presented an immediate danger to others and to public safety. The court, the appeals court, found that the officer properly effectuated a stop in order to ensure that the defendant's erratic operation did not endanger other drivers, and that the stop was within the authority that the mutual aid agreement granted him. In addition, the officer's radio call to the host community after effectuating the stop fulfilled the requirement in the agreement that he notify that community as soon as practically possible. Self-activation. Why? Because he saw danger, he took action, he didn't have time to call first, he got the car pulled over, he called after. The Supreme Court said that's okay. The legislature has made that agreement so that you can do that now. Because it says we can put anything in those agreements we want with respect to how we activate. So I would argue that the agreement in this case, just as the agreement before you, that I'm going to present to you, grants police full powers in participating jurisdictions when circumstances arise dictating an immediate response or action for the good of public safety. I further argue that in dealing with the rapidly unfolding and often dangerous situations, that police are in need of an escalating set of flexible responses. The legislature recognized the need for flexible responses when they decided to amend the statute governing mutual aid agreements. Some areas of concern for this agency are, and let me just tell you some anecdotal things. New West Townsend Road. I was a brand new officer under our original, which we still have, mutual aid agreement with Fitchburg and Leominster and Westminster, and I'm driving down New West Townsend Road. Do you know anything about New West Townsend Road? You'd know that it goes like this in and out of the town line, literally. You never ever know what town you're in when you're driving down New West Townsend Road. Except in our training, this is what we have to do, is find granite town boundary markers that are this big. So if there's an accident or an issue, and it becomes an issue, we go looking for the boundary markers. That's how we know what town we're in. So one night, I get a call, hit and run property damage accident, extensive property. The driver took off. I get down to the car that was hit, was disabled, and I look, and the car that hit it left a streak of antifreeze along the road. So what do? Follow the puddle of antifreeze down the road. I follow the puddle of antifreeze about a quarter of a mile down the road. The hitting car, the one that left the scene, is pulled over to the side and disabled. And where is it parked? Literally, you could measure the car. Here's the boundary marker on the side of the road that I found, and the car was in half in Lunenburg and half in Fitchburg. So I called the Fitchburg police because I didn't want to make a bad child. I don't want to make the guy was drunk. So the Fitchburg cop gets in. He looks at it and says, "Let's flip a coin." That's a true story. And I lost. So I arrested the guy. Fortunately, I didn't get sued because the car was half in Lunenburg. He could have made an argument. All right, other areas of concern. I'm going to point this all out to you because this is what we deal with on a daily basis. West Townsend Road, at Tyler, or no, I'm sorry, West Townsend Road. I'm sorry, the name of the road escapes me, that goes from West Townsend Road over to Route 13. But Seaver Road, there's a better example. These are boundaries. Seaver Road, you cannot get to until you go through Townsend. Seaver Road is in Lunenburg, but you gotta go to Townsend to get to it. So you gotta go down Tyler Road to get to Seaver Road. Now supposing somebody's on Tyler Road, and they're driving down the road and they come upon a guy beating the crap out of his girlfriend. It's an arrestable offense. Is he gonna take the time to call the Townsend police? If you don't know cops, they're gonna take action. They see something like that, they're gonna stop it first, then they'll call. Now theoretically, is that a seizure? Under the old law, yes it is. But he activated himself, then made the call to cover the agreement, and probably save somebody's life if he did it that way, or save somebody from getting a beating. That could happen, it does happen. Gilchrist, Southborough Road, you live down in that area. It's all comes into one area, we have to go down there. Sometimes we have to cross down Southborough Road onto Gilchrist, which is Southborough Road, that's the same road, then take a left on Tyler to get to Seaver Road. So that presents a problem because we're going into another community. Catacootamog Road at Fire Road 16. Anybody familiar with that? How do you get to Fire Road 16? Through Shirley. You cannot get there through Lunenburg. Now, the lion's share of Fire Road 16 is in Lunenburg, but you can't get there unless you drive through Shirley. Another problem. Crocker Ave. Crocker Ave is in both Leominster and in Lunenburg. And you can't get to Crocker Ave without going through Leominster. So, here's a better one. Wilder Road. There's a house on Wilder Road, Lakeside, Wilderwood. I'm sorry, I always confuse those. Lakeside and Wilderwood. Lakeside comes around by the lakefront where the boat ramp is. The boat ramp's in Leominster. The water's in Lunenburg. So we get there and we got a problem on the lake. We have to make arrests on the boat ramp, which is actually in Leominster, but the water's in Lunenburg. Figure that one out. That's where this thing comes into play. You go around the corner on Lakeside, you come to Wilderwood. There's a house literally cut in half by the line. So if I'm arresting somebody on the left side of the house, that might be okay without a mutual aid agreement. But if I got to go to the right side of the house, swear to God, I'm not making this, I don't make this stuff up. I'm boring you to death, I can tell. I got a lot of examples. The Captain's Lounge, the bathroom before they renovated it was in Lunenburg. I had to arrest a guy for possession of cocaine. The road behind it is Ferdinand Passway. The line goes right through the bathroom of the Captain's Lounge, alongside a house that's behind it. The whole house is in Lunenburg, but part of the backyard's in Leominster. I got a guy run from the house in Lunenburg into Leominster. Got to tackle a guy. I'm arresting him in Leominster. What do? Tackle him and call Leominster. That's the way it works. We're putting ourselves in a libelous situation by not having these agreements. Theoretically, we should have statewide powers of arrest. We've been arguing for 23 years since Scott Harshbarger was supposed to file corrective legislation on this LeBlanc case and left office and never did it. So, on and on, Summer Street, Lawton Ave. Anybody know where Lawton Ave? That's behind the old Fitchburg Ford, which is, I don't know what it's called now, but there's a glass place there. Got to go into Fitchburg to get to Lawton Ave, which is in Lunenburg. Same thing. Northfield Road to Fisher Road. There's a million reasons why.
These mutual aid agreements fix that?
Yes.
Who is it between,
The issue is
this agreement that you're talking about
between
there?
us and the whole county of Middlesex.
Every community in Middlesex County?
Yes, yeah. We find ourselves, obviously, the most frequently in Air and in Townsend and Shirley, because they border us, in Ashby. In Ashby, actually, we have an agreement with them, but we had to have an agreement with them because they lock prisoners up in our lockup. So that prompted us to do that. This would eliminate the need for that. It would eliminate the need for us being sworn in any of those towns. It would cover us from, with respect to liability and arrest situations. Don't forget, too, We live all day long, if you're in the detective room and you're out all day long, running to banks in other communities, running to stores in other communities, investigating crimes, talking to people and interviewing people in other communities, other than Lunenburg. That could be anywhere in the whole state. And although we don't have statewide powers of arrest, and yeah, most of the business we do usually is within a fairly small radius of the town of Lunenburg. However, we do reach way out on occasions. Without these agreements sometimes, really putting everybody in jeopardy, from, not just from a liability standpoint. Again, though, this is the exception to the rule. This doesn't happen every single night, but it's a necessary thing to have. And I know that self-activation thing is a sticking point. This is the second time I've been here. But the legislators saw the need to throw that into the law to give you the authority to do that for an obvious reason. We have a 67-page document, rules and regulations that govern us. We don't just act. We have policies and procedures that we have to abide by. Do the police make mistakes occasionally? They certainly do. Not going to deny that. But again, we're talking about the exception to the rule here. So that's my argument. The best I can do.
Chairman? So this was brought before us back when Tom Alonso and Paula Bertram won, and I remember the question that was raised on that was the self-activation. All the examples that Jim talked about, I don't have any problem with that. The issue I have is any police officer from Middlesex County, from another place, happen to be in town, that how do we know that they know they have to call you, that type of thing, as opposed to are they on duty, off duty, other ththings like that. I've got less issue when somebody's on duty, taking action under the process of a detective doing the work on that. Is just something that a little concerned with, basically saying that becomes a violation of law, may exercise police powers for preventing harm to the public, preventing loss, stopping unlawful behavior, investigating possible criminal violations. All good things, and I support the police. There's no question on that part. I'm concerned with the rogue cop 4 towns over being in our town doing this action, and there's nothing that's the concern I have.
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I may, because Bob read, I had a couple thoughts. And like if your neighbor is a Townsend police officer, can he pull you over on your road?
No.
And okay.
Only if you're doing something wrong, illegal.
Right. So now I've gone too fast
Self-activation.
down Williams Drive and my neighbor's a cop from another community. Even if he's not working, can he implement the law? And
Let's put it this way. No. The purpose of this, and this is where the training comes into play, and I'll speak to the road cop thing in a minute. The purpose of this is, I'll give you examples that promote these law changes. There was a case in the same area up in the Andover area. Now, picture this. There's an off-duty cop. He's off-duty. He's from another community, maybe Merrimack, I don't know. I don't remember, without having the case in front of me. He goes to the Chinese restaurant to get some food for his family. He goes to leave, and there's a guy that's completely drunk. And he's getting in his car, and he now is compelled to stop him from getting in the car, which any reasonable person would be. This guy isn't going to hear it. He doesn't really force the issue, but at that point he calls the police and the guy ends up getting arrested. But the argument was that he did stop the guy, and they considered that a seizure. So he got, there was a case because of it. The argument, again, was, no, he did the right thing, he's under the mutual aid, or under mutual aid, he should have done that. He should have stopped it because it was a threat to public safety. So those things can happen. Honestly, if I was in another town, and especially in today's world, with things that go on, and, let me just preface by saying this. Citizens can make arrests on felonies, believe it or not. I know, we probably all know that. If there's a felony, you can make an arrest, a citizen. All right, so I'm a police officer. Even if it's not a felony, I'm in another town, and I see something that's going to endanger somebody's life. Now, I see some guy punching out his girlfriend. I'm not going to stop that. Am I going to have time to call the other community? Not probably till I get the thing under control, keep her from getting hurt. Same thing, if I walk out of a restaurant, I see some drunk in his car, I'm going to make some effort to stop the person until the police get there. And that's what this allows you to do. That's reasonable. Now then you get the rogue situation, you're right. But believe me, that's the exception to the rule. And I've been in this culture now for almost 39 years. There isn't a cop out there that wouldn't react adversely to that kind of behavior. And and I'm not going to, because we're in public, I can talk to you about in private, a recent situation where we handle that immediately. Because we don't want that to happen. That just makes all of us, that puts all of us in peril because of just what you just said. Because now you look at that as thinking, well, this could happen to any cop. Police, for the most part, first of all, they don't want to get involved in other police officers' problems. It's typical. But they're going to act because that's their instinct to act. And they should act if it's a threat to public safety. If it's a speeding car or something like that, you're speeding.
And they don't speed. That was a bad example.
They may.
If you were.
They might call and say, hey, this person lives in my neighborhood and drives way too fast. Well, you can't. The neighbors would call anyway if the cop didn't call if you lived in your neighborhood. But they're not going to pull you over because they can't really.
Although they technically could.
They technically could, but they won't, I would say.
And I guess that's the discussion that I have. Is that,
yes, but that's the exception, believe me.
So you talked about training. So the question that and I believe that the Lunenburg police are well-trained, and I actually think the surrounding towns are pretty well-trained as well. So the question becomes, how is this trained beyond our borders? So any police officer who is in from Middlesex County comes into our town will know how they have to act.
We have to have some faith that the other departments are training them as we do. That's all. It's a leap of faith.
I trust Lunenburg and I trust a lot of other towns, but I don't trust every town.
See, I think there's a big difference if it's on duty, like all the examples you had. I so support that if somebody's on duty and they're crossing lines, they absolutely have to have the right to do that.
Yeah.
But then how many people could potentially be here working on their own for whatever it is they were working on? Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's is that what you're saying, Bob? Like an on-duty situation where you're following through with something versus just having the right to act on your own.
Right.
I mean, I understand the intent of this, and I understand the fact is that you have to deal with a situation when it's in front of you. I'm just struggling, and I guess, and I don't want to abdicate our role, but I actually would like public input on this part, just to get, do people understand what we're doing? And because I'm assuming that the self-activation is not in the other mutual aid agreements that we have with the other towns, is it?
Only because they should be rewritten.
I understand that, but
they're written under the old statute.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. That's why this one came up when Paul and Tom were on, and we had a discussion at that time, and that's why it wasn't adopted at that point. It was that, can we get more information, and then I don't think it ever came back.
It's all about the training, this doesn't happen. Off-duty cops don't want to get involved in that sort of thing. Unless they have to, unless they see that, because instinctually, if they see that there's a condition that's going to cause harm to somebody, they're not just they're acting as human beings. The average human would get involved.
Jim, let me try something different. I think that there's a great deal of support for you and your police officers in Lunenburg, and I think that when we hear mutual aid, we think in terms of when we need to call another town to assist us in some way, or they need to call us to assist in some way. I think we all buy into on duty or in pursuit, or all the examples you gave were clearly, life-threatening or clearly police action was required. Help us feel comfortable. And I don't want to go as far as to say rogue cop, but those areas that are gray,
Yeah.
okay? There's a police officer that lives 30 miles from here. He's not a border town, and he's being a jerk one night, and he tries to arrest somebody. Okay, now he's wrong, but help us, what happens in that case?
Well, he'd be disciplined.
Help us feel comfortable with that,
It's
because I think
it's
we all
written.
buy into all the,
That's actually written into this memorandum, if you read it, because the discipline would fall in his department, but he'd be disciplined for something like that.
And I assume whatever action
I
he
mean,
took wouldn't
it's
hold up
not
in court,
It's
right?
not delineated in the policy what would constitute a violation that he was disciplined for. That's all in his rules and regulations.
Right.
Which are pretty standard throughout the state, as are ours, and his policies and procedures. It's totally against anything a cop would do. This has never happened. I've never even heard of it happening. I have never done that in 39 years myself. I wouldn't even consider it unless I had to get involved because somebody was going to be hurt. Then I'd have to. That's just a human response. I mean, then it's throw the cop thing on top of that, and obviously you're gonna be in there, and you're gonna call the other department. And I'll tell you how it works. Even in this case, like the Methuen case I gave you, where he pulls a guy over for drunk driving, you created a seizure. That's technically arrest. That's what they would argue. However, he didn't actually place him in custody. The other department does. That's how it works. Even we've seen this happen here. We'll have police officers follow a car into Lunenburg that they couldn't pull over in time, and they know the guy's drunk. They have reasonable suspicion that he's under the influence. The guy turns out to be drunk. Typically, unless they can say it's fresh and continued pursuit, we would take the arrest. He'd just ask us, take the arrest. Maybe he's, we've had a case, and I'm trying to think of a situation recently, pulling out of 225, so he's in Lunenburg, taking a left, making a loop. Drunk driver goes by. Well, he can't technically stop the car. We'd make the arrest because it's in Lunenburg. So it's all good, and it gets a person off the road that might be a danger to the public. That's what this is all about. It's not really, I know what you're thinking. There's a lot of training and policy protection that goes along with this sort of thing. And could there be a problem? I'm not going to say there could never be. Obviously, there could be. I don't know what to tell you.
no, I'm not one to be in favor of, creating a huge set of protocols for the less than 1% problem. I mean, I came in here, clearly, this was on my mind as well. I mean, I have been part of some of those previous conversations, and I didn't like the way 604 reads, and by reference, 2.0H refers to self-activation, but hearing Jim, I guess I'm okay with it.
I'm concerned, and before I'd be willing to vote, I'd like to have some information from some town in Middlesex County about what they do for training for people outside their district, for knowing that they have to call the other police, knowing they have to do the other stuff like that, because it's fine to have the policy here, and I'm fine with our officers seeing that and stuff like that. Give me one or two towns, what's their policy that they have for what they do for training, then I'd be fine with supporting. I'm not going to ask for every single town in Middlesex County. That's not reasonable. Just one town that shows what they do for training for dealing with self-activation. I'm fine with the whole policies. I'm fine with mutual aid when you call for it. But I've got the problem with a police officer enforcing or investigating a traffic-related incident or violation. I think this goes beyond what the average person assumes is going to happen in their community with police officers.
All right, well,
It's all about training, not about the intent.
I'm hearing Chief's presentation, I'm kind of comfortable with it as written. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if one of these rogue cops we keep talking about actually makes a bad stop and does something wrong, whatever they charge the individual with, it's not going to obviously hold up in court, and he's going to get in trouble with his own department after the fact, right?
well, that's like the ultimate checks and balances, is the court's gonna examine that arrest, because it was made as an extraterritorial arrest. You're gonna have to present them, which we've done, the mutual aid policy to the court for examination, and then a decision will be made whether or not it's a good arrest. Yeah, I mean,
And it might be a
so many
good,
checks and balances, I don't,
it might
I
be,
have never seen this happen. I have never had a cop come into Lunenburg and make an arrest. Never, from another community.
then we don't need this. But we need it because it may happen, but the concern I
We need to
have,
protect our cops when they go in another community.
I understand that, but I still want to see what the training is. Because I know when I was a police officer, I've seen some hinky arrests that I would question the way they arrested. Maybe the arrest itself was technically correct. The violence, inappropriate language, the way they treated the bystanders, I saw it. I trust our police officers in Lunenburg because you were running a good police officer training process. I'm not entirely sure that that's going to happen with another police officer who comes in and stops one of our citizens. That's what I'm concerned with. Get me something with somebody that does the training.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we all train the same in this state. We go to the same training. It's standardized. It's done by the Mass Police Training Committee. As far as internally, that's where I'm thinking that's going to be difficult to get a hold of any internal. I might be able to get something for you.
There's got to be there's got to be a star police department that's doing the thing that you're doing. Let's just get that, and then if we get one in in Middlesex County, then I'm comfortable moving forward with this.
All right.
In a situation where these happen, like the one that says investigating a possible criminal violation, you know, if this happens and I feel like I'm being arrested by Townsend in my neighborhood, I mean, I almost feel like I would want to call my own police and be like, excuse me, I'm being arrested by Townsend. I mean, I guess it's just, I mean, when it says any violation of...
It's a broad statement because that's not the way we operate.
No, I know, but the
An
word...
investigation is, see, it's a broad statement. And let's go back to this motor vehicle example because it's the best example I can give you. An investigation is the person pulls out of wherever he was, a sandwich shop, getting a sandwich in another community, pulls out on the road. He sees a car swerve into the other lane. Well, now he's investigating a possible drunk driver, and he makes observations, and based on those observations, he develops reasonable suspicion to believe that the person's under the influence. So that's a broad statement. There is nobody I know who would ever come into Lunenburg to conduct an investigation without knocking on our door and saying, hey, Lunenburg Police, can you give us, we're from Fitchburg. We all do this. If nothing else, it's a matter of courtesy. I got to go interview a person down there. I plan on arresting them. I'm going to need you there. If it's a felony, you got to say the words. I mean, if it's a misdemeanor, you got to say the words or whatever. It's better that Lunenburg would say, okay, you're under arrest, and then the Fitchburg officer can take them away. That's the way it works.
May I give you an
yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
just an example from my perspective? Like, I know all the cruisers in town, and I can see their faces and wave, and now I'm driving home from work. Maybe I work overnight shifts, and now I'm being pulled over by a car I don't recognize, or I'm not sure about it. It's not marked the way it's usually marked in my town. I'm scared. I might even flee the scene because I don't know what's pulling me over. So I always like to do these hypotheticals and look at it from a different angle. And I just feel like there's certain scenarios where if I'm driving erratically in Lunenburg, I anticipate being pulled over by someone or something I recognize. All of a sudden now there's a cruiser, it's marked different. I don't know who's pulling me over. I'm actually probably at this point nervous. Like, do I open my door? Do I put down my window? Or do I flee because I don't know who's...
Call 911.
Right, I feel like it could trigger this...
Right? Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you just call 911?
Just from the
All right, so what
perspective
time of
of
night
being
is this?
arrested, like,
What time of night is this?
I don't know, maybe I worked a pharmacy shift and it's like 1 a.m.
It's dark
And
out, and a cruiser pulls up behind you. Can you tell what city that?
once they're there, I would probably know who it was. I mean, I'm talking small town Lunenburg. I'd be like, oh, there's Officer so-and-so. But now it's like, what's he wearing? Those aren't our uniforms.
What if it's
There was a recent case of somebody who pulled somebody over with lights and it wasn't a marked cruiser and
Well,
it was
there's a
found
lot,
out.
I mean, that
Right,
happens.
so,
It was in my hometown.
okay.
So these are
Right.
just looking at, I mean, I know we trust you and we trust and that's, I think, part of the comfort level is I anticipate feeling comfortable being arrested in Lunenburg, hopefully not. Sorry. But then all of a sudden, if you're interfacing with people you don't recognize or understand, that moment could become an uncomfortable moment. And I feel like maybe I'm thinking about this like Bob is the unforeseen circumstances that become a part of new policies and just making sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Is the whole hang-up 604? Is that what everybody's?
That's the one, it's self-actuation,
In order, and it's not in any of the other mutual aid agreements?
because it wasn't
Not in the old
allowed by the
ones.
statute at that time.
They've changed the language and given basically full powers of arrest to police with mutual aid agreements.
There must be a statewide association that has recommended training on it too, so there's got to be some resource that you can get information back to us.
Well, I can print up the thing from John Sheff. Do you know John Sheff? Okay,
No.
he's like the leading lawyer who trains everybody in the state. Police, that is, from Arlington. It's, in fact, you can get it right online. And it refers to Bartlett and all of that. It tells you that, basically that, well, that's, no, come to think of it, that document I read was just explaining how we got to this point and how we were given the authority. In a situation like what you just described, though, believe me, I've seen this happen a million times. The activation part is he pulls you over. Now, he calls the other jurisdiction and says, can you come down here? I got a drunk driver. They take over. That's how it works.
It wasn't drunk driving.
Well, whatever. I mean, I'm just saying, if that was, we're just using that as an example. 54 towns opted on.
The other, on a public policy part, the legislature hasn't done statewide policy. So,
There's a reason for that.
and I understand that there's a
I don't wanna
political and stuff like that, but what I'm saying is that since we're doing it for ourselves, I want a little more comfort that the sending departments are doing the training. One town, show me the training. I'm going to be more comfortable.
All right, I'll do that.
The other thing is a procedural thing, is that the agenda items said discussion about, another one said discussion about town meeting votes may be taken. If we think we may actually want to vote on some of these things going forward, we really ought to add discussion and possible vote, because I was thinking it was just a discussion.
What's that, this thing?
Yeah, just
Agenda.
our agenda,
Oh,
not yours.
I was gonna say, because this was already accepted.
But thank you for the work you've been doing on this.
Oh, you're welcome.
So as far as you're aware, all the communities in Middlesex County have signed on?
54, well, when it was produced a while ago, right away, 54 signed on.
How many communities are there in Middlesex?
A lot.
Guess so.
It's huge.
All right, thank you, Jim.
All right, sorry to keep you
Nope, that's all
up
right.
so late. Feel like me. Here's, you can read, I'll leave this with you because I got copies of it. There's an article from Boston News and an article, there's just notes on this, but there's an article that says John Gilfield, Pine Police News, Boston News, those are articles about that.
Thank you.
Mutual aid agreement.
Okay, back to our old business number 3. We need to revote the closing date of special town meeting warrant until October 11th. Will you tell us what that's about?
So the executive assistant received notification from the Lunenburg Ledger yesterday that the advertisement for the legal notice that was supposed to be in last week's paper was not published. And this is a requirement of the charter. So the ad was placed in today's paper, in the Sentinel, for a extension of the warrant being open until October 11th at 5 p.m. to meet the requirement. So I'm asking the board.
That doesn't change
Take
any
that.
of the dates that follow that in terms of,
No, it obviously is not optimal because that's the same night as the public hearing that finance has and that you're attending as well. And that night I expect recommendations to be made that will be printed in the warrant, but it is what it is, and we.
Hopefully, anyone who wants an article will get it sooner than later. I would make a motion that we change the closing date for the special town meeting warrant until October 11th, 2018 at 5 p.m.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Current business, item number 1, discussion about the scheduling of a workshop meeting with the school committee and topics to discuss at such a meeting. I believe that the recommendation from the school committee was to meet on November 7th, if that's okay, which is a Wednesday night. It is a scheduled school committee meeting, and I believe it's a town hall and on PAC TV. Is that
Televised.
correct? Yes.
Yes.
So first off, is the date okay? And then let's talk about what we think maybe we want to make as part of that.
Okay, for me,
I don't think I have any issues.
No, date's fine.
I think I'm okay. Yep, I'm fine.
Can you
James?
repeat the date, please?
November
November
7th?
7th?
November 7th.
Wednesday.
Okay.
And, we have time between now and the 7th, but are there any suggestions on what might be the topics that we'd want to do? I think this was kind of suggested from both our side and their side as a good first step, new superintendent, a couple of new members of the school committee, for us to kind of begin to work together.
So certainly the future school needs for facilities, what their planning process is, get their input on the TC Passios proposal that we have before us, just as the initial discussion. There was one other thing that came up before, I can't remember what it was.
And just the future of Turkey Hill. I mean, in working with them for capital planning, they obviously plan to keep that building in operation for a long time, but to have the official discussion with the whole board would be.
That was what the thing was what's it going to cost? What do they think we're going to need in 10 years about the Turkey Hill Middle School? I think it was the cost of it, as well as what are the school planning process that they're going to do, which I'm sure the superintendent hasn't done yet. Since just
Yeah, I would think that this being our first meeting, we'd want to lay some of these out as things to think about, things to talk about, and then let us both go do a little homework.
Yep.
As opposed to, grilling people on quarterly budgets and things like
And
that.
I'm sure, I mean, if we're talking about the buildings, John Londa's got to hold most of the resident knowledge for all of that
Right,
compared to the board members.
right.
Now, I'm not sure if this first meeting is the time to bring it up, but I would like the inclusion of the town in the teachers' union contract negotiations.
something to talk about.
Such
Yeah.
a big
Mhm.
piece of the town's budget. You
And
need
the-
to be at the table.
And then school population projections, whatever they can, how they do it, teaching us how they do it, projections.
Okay.
Those can vary
I-
so
I'd like to look it
widely,
up. I'd like to look at opportunities for joint planning. I mean, the
Yes.
obvious ones are,
Yes.
budget and capital, but events, outreach, communication.
Communication.
I think, as opposed to seeing them as stovepipes, maybe there's opportunities for us to do some joint.
The school's already, they're already involved in disaster planning, things like that with the town?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. It'd be good to even just highlight what we already have for relationships with them, would be good to have.
And then I had one other one is specifically to them. We've talked about this in general terms, but I'd like to talk to them about liaisons, the role of liaisons.
Yeah,
Do we need to have a relationship that looks something like a liaison with them or not? Either way, both ways, whatever.
And you could broaden it into communication.
Right. So, why don't we kind of plan on that? I don't know what percent of that's a normal meeting of theirs. I don't know what percent they want to turn over to this, but we'll
I think
join them.
We'll be lucky if we get an hour.
They're meeting, tomorrow night, but when they talked about this before, they were talking about a workshop, not a lot
Good.
of other business.
Good.
Okay,
Good. That's a good thing. Great.
First of many.
Yep. Okay. Current business number 2, authorize the chairman to sign disclosure statement. What do we get there?
So this is related to the Gilchrist Street property, for the disposition piece. Piece of that, the requirement is to have the chairman sign this disclosure statement that's filed with DCAM, which is, it's escaping me at the moment, Capital Asset Management.
That's
Department of Capital Asset Management. So, and this would occur after the purchase and sale agreements have been signed, but they cannot be fully enforced, or they're not valid until this piece is filed.
And that's filed at the state of the registry
Yes.
there? Not the registry of deeds, but their
Office.
Their office, okay. I would make a motion to authorize the chairman to sign the disclosure statement for disposition of the Gilchrist Street property.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll go
Any
with the
opposed?
nay.
Okay. Number 3, sign union contract with Public Employees Local 39, which is the DPW unit.
Okay. And the board had signed the memorandum of agreement back in July, if you remember. So this is, all the terms of that were put into final
To
form.
the final contract.
Yes.
I was thinking, we already did this.
Yeah. It's
Now
just
now it's
your
the final
signatures.
document, okay.
Can I get a motion to sign that?
So moved to sign the union contract with Public Employees Local 39 DPW unit.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, number 5, discussion about special town meeting warrant articles, including articles as the board may add to the warrant.
Okay. So in your packet is a draft of the warrant so far. So we still have until October 11th now for people to submit articles, including citizen petitions. And so currently there are 13 articles on this draft. If you add in the noise bylaw, that will be another article that is expected to be submitted. And I can walk through each one if you would
That'd be good.
like.
Yeah.
Okay. So Article 1 is a typical annual special town meeting article that does budget adjustments to the current fiscal year's budget. Also included in that article is the possibility to amend the amounts voted for the capital plan, the fiscal 19 capital plan. And this would address any budget adjustments, address any unexpected decrease or increase in the current fiscal year, or a surplus in available revenues that equates to additional levy capacity. Article 2 was, I submitted This was part of a motion at last special town meeting under the budget adjustment article was to place money into the special purpose stabilization fund. A more appropriate scope of the article would have it separated out because it's not part of the operating budget. It's its own account, stabilization fund. So that would allow for any excess available funds to be placed into the special purpose stabilization fund. Article 3 funds the first year of the collective bargaining agreement that you just signed for the DPW unit. And that would be a transfer from the salary reserve account to fund those monetary items. Article 4 is, you've probably seen this before or noticed you've seen this before on previous special town meetings and town meetings, is to appropriate a portion or all of a net premium paid to the town upon the sale of general obligation bonds, and this is for the $3,685,000 general obligation bond from dated April 25th, 2018, to pay the cost of the capital projects financed by such bonds and to reduce the amount authorized to be borrowed for such projects by a like amount, and to reserve all or any portion of the net premium to be appropriated for future capital projects. And the finance director will be available to answer questions on this on October 11th. Article 5 is to hear an interim report from the Charter Review Committee. Article 6 is to amend the salary administration bylaw, certain sections. The sections to be amended or asked to be amended address vacation accrual, definition of a part-time employee, and the FMLA section that would reflect the town's policy, current policy. Article 7 is to vote to raise and appropriate, borrow or transfer from available funds a sum of money to fund a salary survey for the positions within the salary administration plan. So within the salary administration bylaw, there's a clause that states that every 3 years a compensation review be performed.
I would suggest maybe that actually fund a compensation review instead of a salary survey. Because it's a little bit more complicated doing the compensation review, because the salary survey sounds like you're just going to get a copy of the salaries. Is that a standard or?
Yes, so they did discuss, and we've gotten preliminary proposals. They would only want to do a salary survey.
Because it's more expensive to do the
Yes.
other. Okay.
And in,
At a much reduced cost.
yeah.
Okay.
Article 8 is to extend the moratorium on the sale and distribution of recreational marijuana. Planning board article. Article 9 is planning board article to amend the zoning, chapter 250, section 2.1, terms defined and word usage. Article 10 is planning board article amending zoning bylaw, chapter 250, section 4.1, permitted and prohibited uses. Article 11, planning board article amending zoning bylaw, chapter 250, section 6.5, signs. In Article 12, planning board article amending zoning bylaw, chapter 250, section 8.3, which is about the Board of Appeals. In Article 13, on the draft warrant, is a citizen's petition for a prohibition of single-use plastic bags. Any questions?
Sure, question if I may. Do we anticipate that the selectmen are having any of our own articles?
That's part of what we're talking about now, if we have an article or anything. Was there anything other than what's here coming from us that we had proposed articles?
I don't believe so. The only potential one was to ask for additional funding for conceptual schematic design specifications for the TCP.
Which
And do we have agreement that we're going to wait until the annual town meeting on that one?
It would seem.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not ready to take any action on any of these. I mean, I'm supportive of them, but I want to see some of the dollar amounts in
Yeah,
there.
right. Mhm. Okay. Well, we have a couple more meetings before we have to.
So this will be on next Tuesday's.
Good. Okay. Number 6, a citation for heroism. We have a citation here. This letter is to record, it's addressed to John Hazelrig. Dear John, this letter is to recognize and commend you for your heroic actions on the night of January 3rd, 2018. The town of Lunenburg was informed that you will be receiving the Carnegie Medal from the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission for your extraordinary act of heroism, along with Russell Phippen for rescuing Revath Tran from drowning in the Merrimack River. Your actions were immediate and without concern for your own safety, which resulted in giving Mr. Tran another chance at life. It takes a special person to put their own life at risk to save someone they do not know, and we are proud to have you as a resident of our town. And there's a citation for heroism included that's probably worth reading, I would think. Citation for heroism presented to the Lunenburg resident John Hazelrig in recognition of his life-saving actions while rescuing Revath Tran from drowning in the Merrimack River on the evening of January 3rd, 2018. John, along with Russell Phippen, a tactical flight operator, was piloting a helicopter equipped with searchlight that was dispatched only to illuminate the rapidly flowing ice-filled river. Arriving at the scene, they noticed Tran to be exhausted and clinging to a rock. They realized he needed immediate assistance. John lowered the helicopter. This is written in one of those fonts with all the... Everything looks like an S. John lowered the helicopter, which was not designed for rescue operations, to the river's surface as Phippen positioned himself to reach Tran. Phippen managed to pull Tran partially out of the water and halfway into the helicopter. With the rear doors open and Phippen hanging onto Tran, John flew directly to a nearby hospital. Revath Tran suffered from hypothermia and a cut on his chin, but recovered shortly afterwards. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen does hereby commend John Hazelrig for his dedicated and heroic actions beyond the call of duty. Lunenburg Board of Selectmen, October 2nd, 2018. They're here. Okay. I don't need a vote to sign this, do I? Congratulations, John. Okay, we have minutes for August 14th, September 4th, and that's September 26th. Yes.
I have some corrections on September 26th.
Oh, that's the Water District meeting?
Yes.
And they are?
Well, on the first page, where it talks about Mr. Burr stating that the idea was in the short term, we would use the resource from Lunenburg to take care of Lancaster's needs, and for the long term, develop another water source within that area that would take care of their needs and give Lunenburg an additional resource. However, we cannot own a water source outside of the district for the district, so the IMA was the best option. Mr. Ebersol disputed that assertion. So these minutes make it seem like that's the way it is. And I'm on the bottom of the first page.
Yep. Yeah, so that really should have a statement. Mr. Ebersol disputed that assertion.
Yeah.
Just state it, yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's not necessarily, and,
Was there another?
like in the third paragraph down, in the middle, their original plan, so it's like the fourth sentence down, their original plan was to expand the water district, but met resistance due to the amount of residential construction coming into the area and having more voters from another community in the water district. It's not more voters, it's voters. from another community. You know, we don't have any voters from the other
Yep.
community.
Yep,
So,
agreed.
So deleting the word more.
Right. On the next page, that sort of the second paragraph, after discussing putting in a new well in Lancaster with the water district, Lancaster determined they did not have the manpower to maintain it, so placed the task before the Lunenburg Water District. It was infrastructure, not a new well.
Yeah.
Remember that? They were talking about, originally Lancaster wanted to take care of the infrastructure, and then they said they really didn't have the manpower to handle it, so they wanted us to take care of the infrastructure, or the water department to
Yeah,
take care of the
and
infrastructure.
this actually is doing two things. They put a new well and infrastructure in another part of Lancaster, and they don't have the capacity to do the part near us as well. So I think this actually did two different things together. I'd suggested saying, after discussing putting a new well and infrastructure in Lancaster
Okay. You can just add it.
within their water district, Lancaster determined that they will not have the manpower to maintain, it's not maintain that because they're doing that, they won't have the power to do the expansion of Lunenburg, so they place that task back into the Lunenburg Water District.
Okay.
Any Lane, you can ask me if there's a question when you rewrite it.
Okay, so then the next paragraph, Mr. Ebersol stated, roughly 2/3 of the town is in the water district, and we should control our destiny. His concern with expanding the district, instead of and, it should be is that you have a water district meeting where typically, I would add, 10 to 30 people run the annual meeting. Thus, instead of yet, 50 people from Lancaster could take over, not the town, but the water district.
Yep.
Does that all make sense?
Lancaster could take over.
Yeah, right.
Here they come.
And then further down in there, it said, based on the chart provided by Lancaster of 185,510 gallons per day of usage, it should be by 2023. It's not usage today.
Right.
Right.
So then, potential income for the water district from this agreement could be $350,000 per year eventually. You know, it's not day one. And then we go down to that really short two-sentence paragraph. Discussion ensued about possibly extending the water district into Lancaster by an act of legislature rather than have a well in Lancaster that the water district may not own. It's not, does not own, it may not own, because we don't know whether they could own it or not.
Okay.
And that's the last, let's see. Yep, that's it.
I would make a motion, we approve the minutes with those corrections.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I was going to wait till committee reports, but I felt that, even though we were working minutes, I felt that we should make a statement of what happened at that meeting. So if I might, I'd like to just read this and see if you all agree that that's what happened. This was a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Water District held on September 26th. The Lunenburg Water District, a separate municipal entity, would like to enter into an intermunicipal agreement, IMA, with the town of Lancaster to sell water to help defray capital costs of the water district. Although not required, the water district would like the town's support through the Board of Selectmen. We discussed general support of the idea, but feel the actual language of the agreement needs to be crafted to better protect Lunenburg water users. Also, maximum water usage, daily pumping, restrictions imposed by the DEP need to be understood so that an increase in pumping to supply Lancaster needs does not negatively impact Lunenburg pumping restrictions. We agreed to continue to communicate with the Water District as they negotiate the IMA and possibly have them join us in a future Board of Selectmen meeting televised in order to better communicate with you, the public.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And just for the point of reference, that what's different now between this versus the past, in case anybody followed it before, was that they were looking to expand the water district.
Right.
In that this is something entirely different, in that the intermunicipal agreement keeps it all, the district within Lunenburg, and just sells the water. Because they feel like if anybody at home is following, it's not the water district trying to repeat the process of the the past, it's a separate item.
Although there were some members of their board that
That still
wanted to
wanted
do
it,
that,
yes.
but
They were
They
still
had the-
playing that
But I
tune.
think that'll be people's first question
Right.
who already felt like this
was dealt with.
was dealt with and that it was said to be, no, that that's not what's happening again.
Just one?
Two.
Two
Three.
warrants. One is accounts payable in the amount of $525,503.32. And a payroll warrant in the amount of $815,997.24. Are there any action file issues?
One more warrant.
Sorry, one more warrant. A payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $589,132.13. Are there any action file issues? Okay.
I actually have one. I'd like the board to do, at a future meeting, a review of all our licenses and permits. That hasn't been done for a few years.
Review of
The fees.
the fees, okay.
Oh, good.
Yep, yeah, that too. Most appropriate.
And I assume we're adding to the Tuesday's agenda meeting with conservation and the concerned citizens from
For
tonight.
forestry.
Because I'll have to contact the Conservation Commission
Yeah,
so they can post a
as soon
agenda.
as soon as possible, yeah, if they can get that done in time, we'll do it next Tuesday, otherwise, as soon as we can get it done.
Okay.
No other action file issues? Any questions or comments about the Animal Control Officer quarterly report that was in
I
the
thought it
package,
was
I guess?
fascinating. Boy, a bear in somebody's backyard.
Okay. Upcoming meeting schedule. We are planning to meet on October 9th and the 16th. The 16th is the workshop for policies. We have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee on October 11th. We are not planning to meet on the 23rd because of a quorum issue, but we may meet on the 30th if necessary, and if we find that we have to do that, we'll have to negotiate with the Sewer Commission to see which of us is on TV and how do we do that. And then we meet once in November on the 6th prior to the special town meeting on on November 13th.
And possibly the 7th.
And
The
possibly the
school.
7th,
With
right.
the, with the school committee, right?
All right.
I didn't check today, but a couple of days ago I checked, and the special town meeting's not on the town calendar yet. And I did ask the town clerk to put that on a couple times.
Okay. I'll follow up.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other committee reports that,
Sure. I've been going to the planning board meetings and what was it, Article 9, Article 8, the moratorium in terms of the explanation of what that is. It would go until the spring in terms of the recreational marijuana. And I feel like the main reason for that, in case people are wondering, is it has to do with the ability to vote things in. You can't bring votes on the topic through any election other than a local election. So you couldn't utilize the fall elections to put a question on that pertains just locally to the town. And so bringing through the two options of prohibition or to adopt the bylaws, you have to use a vote and a town meeting. And so in the spring, those two could happen together. If you brought it through a town meeting now, you wouldn't be able to make it official through a vote unless you had a special election or waited till the spring, I think. Feels right? Okay. So that's the moratorium, is just to get us to spring is a point where you could concisely deal with presenting it, every option to the community.
And that's what they're planning to do.
So it's not a moratorium against marijuana or anything, it's just to get to a point where all of it can be managed together.
Are you all set? Yep. Okay. Just quickly, I attended the MART meeting on 9/26. They are hoping to have a balanced budget this year, which will be good for all of us. The school committee met on September 19th. They announced a $195 donation from the Stillman Fair, and a $450 donation from the Coonies for Nature's Classroom Scholarships. I guess they do that every year. They're working on increasing communication and outreach to the community, and they're meeting again tomorrow evening. I went to the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Coalition Steering Committee meeting earlier today. We planned the annual meeting, which will be held November 14th at the new Fish and Wildlife facility in Westboro, which is a beautiful facility. They're hoping lots of people turn out. And that's it.
Heather kind of covered the capital planning commission already for me, so I'm good.
Any public comment from the public? Please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
There's a group of us working, obviously, on increasing community engagement, as you are, business development and maintaining open space. In particular, in reference to the earlier discussion on and the entertainment license and the noise ordinance, I'm a little disheartened by the community engagement. Working with this group, and there's 3 of us in the audience. It's 3 hours in to this meeting. It was on the agenda to be a discussion. I motioned to speak. That was denied. I think we can do a better job with community engagement, as we've all recognized. So in particular to the noise ordinance and the entertainment license. Many people have various events, various parties, various functions. Good for community engagement, good for maintaining open space, good for business. So how do we do that in a reasonable way? There's a group of us interested in working in town in coming up with the bylaws. We now have a proposal of a noise ordinance done by the chief of police. We have a proposal by the land director for an entertainment license procedure. I would ask for this body to allow for public to engage in co-crafting of those 2 documents. I would call for the public to be allowed to meet with those individuals, to have a task force on each of the processes prior to it going to town meeting. I think that would encourage the folks that I know who do alpaca events, who do all the events which I believe are positive for this town. Again, from community engagement, business, and maintaining open space, that most of the town want of those 3 issues. So to go back to the specifics, I ask for you to pass a motion to encourage or request those 2 individuals who are leading those 2 documents to invite the public, residents, to join them in co-crafting those documents to then come back and present to this body. I would also say, in myself speaking as a resident, it's extremely time-consuming as residents to make these requests, to form these task groups without the support of town officials including yourself, town officials including the paid staff. So my request is for encouragement of town officials to outreach residents, to be invited and encouraged to participate in co-crafting these documents, where their time will be respected and where their input would be respected. The last point I wish to make is there have been requests prior for this town to consider a business development manager position. And were there such a position, I believe, and in looking at neighboring towns who have such positions, of a business development manager, I could see that person encouraging these two documents, the noise ordinance and entertainment license procedure, to be inviting of such events within reasonable limitations. I heard it earlier today, it's what these documents are going to say no to. I encourage the members here to rather look at what the documents will encourage businesses, homeowners, folks who are interested in all the benefits that parties, events, and functions create for our residents, to consider what those documents will say yes to rather than no to. So thank you for considering those points.
Thank you.
I just want to respond to one part of what you said. I don't disagree with anything you said. The reason I did not call on you in the middle of the meeting when you raised your hand, just to be specific, was that the agenda item this evening was for our board to formulate what it was we wanted to then discuss. And the one of them was a warrant article, which will have a public hearing in conjunction with the Finance Committee, and then be at special town meeting where there's quite a bit of public input.
Right.
And the other is a policy that Mr. Ebersol pointed out will, in fact, as it gets closer to the policy stage, have public hearings involved. Having said that, I also agree that it is in our best interest to co-craft these things early on in the process. And anyone, especially a task group that wants to get something on the agenda and be part of the discussion, is welcome. Tonight it was put on the agenda by us to get to a certain point, and that was not our intent, just to be clear.
The special permit policy is not going to town meeting. That's a policy here. So we have plenty of time to get public input before that is adopted by us.
Correct, and let me be specific again. My request then would be, as you look at your noise ordinance, to remove the items that may target parties and events and functions, and consider putting those in your workshop for the entertainment license, or to omit them for the time being until you have more input before going to town meeting.
Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public? Any comment from the board?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.